Okay, looks like we're live. I got a message.
Yes, we are now connected.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Board meeting of March 3rd, 2022, virtual again. We have some general business to conduct first between now and 6:30. At 6:30, we'll be having a public hearing for Mather Hospital, which is the only item on the agenda going forward from that point. We're being broadcast on two different platforms tonight. That's Zoom and YouTube. If you're on YouTube and you'd like to make a comment, because we'll be requesting public comments and hearing from the public on Mather Hospital after a presentation by the applicant, you need to get off of YouTube between now and 6:30. And I'll repeat this again at 6:30. But you have some time, you have plenty of time to get off YouTube, log into Zoom, and that link is available on the village website, correct?
Yes, it's available at the village website. If you go to portjeff.com/virtual meetings, the planning board meeting is up there with both the link to YouTube and the link to our Zoom call.
Okay, so anyone, if you're watching on YouTube, you won't be able to comment. So please log on Zoom between now and 6:30. So we'll be hearing a presentation from the applicant and then public comment following on the application that's currently pending before the planning board. Items of general business first between now and 6:30. The next planning board work session meeting is actually next Thursday, March 10th at 6 o'clock. That's again going to be a virtual meeting. So it'll be, again, these two platforms, Zoom and YouTube. As far as I know, there are no public hearings on that date. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes,
so
that's correct.
That's just a pure work session where we'll start at 6 and we'll get, other than some general items, which include adopting minutes of previous meetings and a trustee report, we will get right into the work session. So there won't be any delay on that meeting. And since we aren't going to be taking any comments, you can either watch on Zoom or on YouTube. So that being said, other than to mention that date, we just have the trustee report from Rebecca Casse. And Rebecca, just
very good. On. Thank you. I've been seeing the planning board so often that my reports are shorter and shorter but it's a joy to see at least see everyone. We have coming up as a resolution for this coming Board of Trustees meeting, the revisions to codes 205 and 250, which are the rental codes and the bed and breakfast codes. Work has been done there in hopes of modernizing our bed and breakfast code to help pick a direction in Port Jefferson Village for things like VRBO and Airbnb, because our code didn't previously address these types of rentals. So there's the resolution is going to set a public hearing for the first Board of Trustees meeting in April. So that will come to light after a great deal of work. Let's see, the Conservation Advisory Council, which I'm also the liaison for, has been working on additions to the building guidelines or the architectural guidelines for Port Jefferson Village, which to my understanding are given out to any major projects, either new build or perhaps significant renovations. The concept is to add environmentally minded suggestions to these guidelines. Once we have a document that is close to what the CAC would like to see, we will bring that to other arms like the ARC, run that by the planning department, of course, and if the planning board would like to see and comment on this, that could be helpful as well. And that is my report for today.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Anybody have any questions for Rebecca?
I have a question. Is the trustee meeting going to be in person
Yes.
this March 7th?
Great question. Yes, we are back. Excuse me. We are back to in person. As I cough and sneeze, we are back to in person. And the infection rates are much lower, and it was determined that would be the option. I cannot say with certainty, but I believe that I know that we're working on continuing to film and broadcast the Board of Trustees meetings, despite being in person, so that they can be viewed thereafter. Personally, I think this is a great way for residents who, for whatever reason, cannot make the meetings, can view them and always email in comments or attend a future meeting about what is discussed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, thoughts? Okay, that's it for me then. Thank you all.
Okay, so we have, because we always start public hearings according to the official notice and advertisements, and also postings on the property, which I understand the postings, I saw the signs for today's public hearing, so I assume the proper posting has been done at the site. In fact, I saw a lot of signs, a lot of new signs.
Yes,
and they've
and-
been out for an adequate number of days before the meeting, so that should be taken care of. We already had the mailings were, well, the certified
I've
mailings
received,
too,
yeah.
right?
I've received
Okay.
all the receipts of mailing and the affidavit of mailing and posting.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. Okay, anyone have any other questions or?
If I could just add real quick, Mr. Chairman, as part of the directions for the public hearing, if we could please ask the public not to use the chat function on Zoom to comment. We can't guarantee if you'd use the chat function that your comment will be logged in or answered. So please, if you have something that you would like to share with the board, please, when the time comes and you're asked by the chairman to use the raised hand function on Zoom. We're, as I said in the last meeting, we are not professional YouTubers. We don't have the skill set to make sure we're working and following the hearing while going back and forth through the chat to make sure you're all heard. So please use your raised hand, so we cannot guarantee that anything in the chat section will be incorporated into the record.
I wrote it down, doesn't mean I'm going to remember to do that, but it was
I'll
written
interrupt
down.
again. Don't worry about it.
And for anyone just tuning in, that scary looking logo in the box, that's our stenographer who is listening, but she will not be taking notes until 6:30. She'll be doing a transcript of the meeting, which we will order, by the way, Cindy.
Yes, I will make sure we order it.
All right, I almost wish we had some music to play in the background, since we're paused now until 6:30. Anyone who wants to go get something to eat at
Ray?
home, please do so.
Ray,
Yes, Laura.
how are we planning on getting the comments that we received, the tons of comments we've received via mail? Are you planning on reading those in to the, or are you going to do are you doing that spreadsheet?
Yes, I have a spreadsheet which will Lisa will put on the screen. So
Okay.
we'll see all the names of the people who actually responded. And I have it through February 24th.
Okay.
So it's a week or so ago, correct?
And then
Yeah.
I know we were in our last meeting, we said if someone's already commented on something that you agree with, you don't need to comment, but I'm wondering if we could just see, like, people could raise their hands, maybe,
I think
just
the
so
way
we
it's
can
gonna
see
be,
how many
yeah,
people.
I think,
I don't
well, we'll start with planning is certainly not done by a community raise of hands, but
I get
think-
that.
yeah. So, but I wanted to, Ray and I did discuss it earlier today, and there will be an instruction saying if you have heard something that you agree with or mirrors pretty much what you were going to say, raise your hand to come in. You'll be let in to share that information.
Okay.
Don't feel the need to say all the words all over again. It's simply saying, I agree with the statements made by previous speaker on the following subjects.
Okay.
It is going to be a very lengthy meeting. I know we have a lot of public interest in this, but I know that the village certainly wants to make sure everyone has the opportunity to be heard. That said, for the sake of time and mental acuity, if we could make sure that we're not just repeating each other, but we can be succinct in saying, I agree with everything that so-and-so said on the following subjects, rather than a full
Okay.
verbose sharing.
Yes, thank you. Just so that we know how many people. Right.
Everyone will have the opportunity to be heard. Absolutely.
Thank you. You guys are way on top of it. Good job.
Point of inquiry, is there a time limit per speaker?
This is a good question because I was going to say that Lisa will give us an idea who's how many people are in the waiting room, which I guess doesn't necessarily mean they want to be allowed in because they may just be watching on Zoom. So we will try to get a handle on, I guess, the number of people watching and kind of use that as a general guide as how many people might be available. If there is a considerable number, because as Allison said, we have a long presentation, the board will have a lot of questions. There are some issues that will generate their own discussion, probably for 15, 20 minutes or so, that have already been identified. We may impose a 3-minute limit on speaker comments. And anyone who's commented previously, again, if they just want to pop on and just say that they've commented, I see there's a.
Yeah, somebody's interested in knowing the end date for providing written comment that'll be incorporated into the public record. I think there's two pieces here. One is depending on when the public hearing is closed, which,
Right.
And so if you want to address.
It's likely that the hearing will be kept open tonight and we will have a second hearing. We'll get into that when the actual presentation occurs, and the comments will, at least be a couple of weeks and possibly to the date of the next hearing if we decide to adjourn the hearing to the next available date, which we have not yet actually established. It would be early April figure. Although we do have
if it's the next planning board meeting, it would be April 7th.
Right, and it's possibility that we could tack it on to that meeting. I don't know. I'm sure your staff does not have an idea of how many applications are going to be on the April 7th meeting, but I have a feeling there's some that are pending that could make it, and it might be worthy to have a separate meeting again, like we are tonight for Mather.
And Mr. Chairman, might I suggest if prior to going to the full public hearing, if the board wishes to take a look at their calendars, if you wanted to do it on a separate meeting, I don't know that from a staffing perspective that we have any problem with it being tacked on to the standing meeting. But if the board prefers, and at the chairman's discretion, if a separate date is preferable, maybe having an idea of where that will land prior to getting into the meat and potatoes of the overall hearing, that might be helpful.
Okay.
Since we do need to postpone to a specific date. And I will just say that looking at the calendar in front of me, I can tell you in April, the pickings are fairly slim because the 21st is a school holiday week, and which we usually do not schedule meetings during for the sake of residents as well as staff. And then the following week, that Thursday, is the zoning board meeting, which I don't know yet if there will be anything on their agenda. But so the 14th is the only other date in April on a Thursday that is not occupied.
Okay.
I'm good. I can be there the 14th.
Yeah, I do have another meeting that night, so.
Yeah, I'm up in the air about the 14th.
Yeah.
What about March 10th?
That's next week.
That'd be a little too quick.
Too quick? Okay.
If I might suggest using April 7th, and if we have a large agenda of other items, perhaps choosing a different work session date for those. I don't know if that.
Could we do
makes
the
sense.
Wednesday before as the work session on the 6th?
Oh, that's right.
We used to
I see what
do,
you're saying. So
April
use the
7th is-
14th for continuation of the hearing if we decide to do that. and have a work session.
Sorry, I
I'm
thought
sorry,
I
use
thought
the
the
7th.
use the 7th.
Use the 7th as the continuation, and maybe have a work session early that week, or we can talk about dates, because that'll depend on how much is in. I mean, we can do that by email, I would think.
As long as it's just a work session and
Work
not a
session.
public hearing, we're not constrained by the notice. But even if we wanted to choose another public hearing date for other items, we
Okay.
have time to do that.
Okay, well, I guess that'll be a separate discussion. We could, yeah, okay. I got you. So if we continue, we could set it for continue tonight, or adjourn it tonight, we can set it for the 7th. Set that date and then decide the other items as we go along. Anyone else have any questions, comments about? I don't want to talk too much about Mather, because we had, just for those watching, we had started a public hearing last week, but there was a problem with the notices being posted on the site and the mailings, that they didn't go out. So we aborted that attempt. So we did have a little bit of a discussion, but didn't get that far.
I'm going to make another plea for people to please don't use the chat function. I'm seeing additional questions coming in. We will be explaining the full process again once we open the public hearing for how one participates. As the chairman stated earlier, if you are currently on YouTube, you need to and you wish to comment, you need to come off the YouTube platform and get onto the Zoom platform. When the chairman says it's time for public comments, there is a raise your hand function on the Zoom platform. You will raise your hand, and one by one, people will be let into the panel, so that way that you can address the board directly. So again, I appreciate that we're all getting more savvy at using these platforms, and that using the chat function is something that may seem quite appealing, but I cannot promise that the staff will be able to monitor it, particularly once the public hearing begins. And I cannot guarantee that any comment made in there, any question made in there, any concern made in there will make it to the board and to the record. So I appreciate everyone's patience, and you will get the opportunity to ask your questions directly to the board once the public comment portion of the hearing begins. And again, if you're on YouTube, please leave YouTube and head on over to Zoom. When the chairman opens the opportunity for public comment, you will hit the raise your hand function on the Zoom platform, and you'll be let in so you can address the board directly.
Right, and I'll repeat this again after 6:30, so that anybody tuning in exactly at 6:30 will hear it as well. And there'll be time, because we're going to hear the initial presentation from the applicant first. So there'll be time to get off YouTube and get onto Zoom. Anyone else have any general discussion on anything?
Well, I saw something really neat the other day, which was I was on Beltaire Road heading south, and I was just about parallel to where the current emergency room was. And I looked up towards the train station. You can see the back of Port Jeff Crossings from Beltaire Road. And I thought it was kind of neat. It's like, wow, I didn't think, yeah, I didn't think it would be visible. The back of it would be visible from Beltaire Road, but it was kind of neat.
Yeah, it's nice to see the first building uptown taking shape.
It looks like it's coming along very nicely.
And
Construction's going quite well.
One North Country also received their planning board approval, right? And
the plans are under review.
Plans are under review. Good, for building permit, correct?
Yep. Yes. Yep. We don't have all the documents quite yet, but they're on their way.
Right, and we saw they received IDA funds for construction. Construction material costs are ridiculous. I mean, they've gone way up, and getting the materials is another problem. So it's a tough time to be building because of those two things.
I had received a question about the status of the Ferry office building. I know the building that was there came down, and then they've been issued a permit, or?
Oh, no, they don't have a permit yet. They are working on, we had a meeting with the Ferry company, I think 2 weeks ago, to go over future plans and statuses of their various projects. They mentioned that they are finalizing their building plans so they can apply for permit. They had previously submitted building plans for permit, I think mid-process with the planning board, but then the project changed so dramatically, it's not even facing in the same direction anymore, that they had to put together new engineer drawings. So they're working on the engineer drawings. We hope to have those in the next couple of weeks. But yes, they are certainly, though there has been a bit of a delay, they are looking to move forward with that building.
Very good. Thank you for that update.
Sure.
If I may, I'm just going to respond to a comment that was posted in the chat. It's about viewing the panelists, and I just want to clarify that when Mather's team comes in and starts presenting, everyone will be introduced and you'll see all the panelists. We're not bringing in anyone who's using the raised hands function right now because this is not yet the public comment portion of the meeting. When Ray opens the meeting up for public comment, I'll begin bringing in one at a time people who wish to make comments after they've heard the Mather presentation. So I know it's a little different here on YouTube, but it should be very clear and hopefully run very smoothly once we get to that portion of the evening.
Okay, and I currently see 30 people in the waiting room on Zoom. Some of them are presenters for Mather, so we have a good crowd there. I don't know how many want to speak or just watching on Zoom, but that'll give us an indication possibly of a time limit for comment. 3 minutes seems like a short time, but you can say a lot in 3 minutes. You really focus on getting to the point of your comments. Good evening, Lorraine. And that's a nicer background.
Sorry, I was on mute. Good evening. Thank you.
We have one portion. We're gonna just to let you know. There's a spreadsheet of prior comments that we've received before this meeting. It has names on it. I'm going to be reading and summarizing some of the comments on that spreadsheet. Cindy or Lisa can provide, I guess it'll be Cindy, will provide you with the spreadsheet so that, because I'll be mentioning names instead of swearing people in and going through spelling,
Okay.
we're just going to summarize.
That's great. Then I don't have to interrupt and ask. So that's good. Okay.
Yeah. But we will, of course, require people to be sworn in with their name and address.
Do you want me to do the swearing in?
Yes. And you can do it, for example, when Mather comes on with their group, you can do it collectively.
All right.
You know, have them all, because we can see their hands.
Okay, but if I did it collectively, would you have those people's names that are coming in?
Yeah, and I think you can actually, well, you'll be busy, but you can actually get them on Zoom by moving the cursor and the names show up, usually.
Okay, all right,
Unless,
okay. Yep.
you know.
And Lorraine, they usually, from past meetings with them, they will be introducing themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right.
Yeah,
If there's
so
a problem, at least I can come back and ask. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you can't hear anyone, sometimes the connections are bad or the person's mic is not good, particularly if it's a commenter. You can certainly ask them, interrupt and ask them to speak up, or, you know, hopefully people won't be having technical difficulties with their equipment tonight, but it does happen.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I might suggest that you mention, as I know that Cindy has been receiving additional letters throughout the day, that just because we don't mention your name and comment does not mean we don't have it. The village has gotten a significant number of letters, particularly in the last 24 hours. And we're going as quickly as we can, but at some point we had to stop printing out and scanning because we had to prepare for the meeting. So just because your name and comment was not mentioned does not mean we don't have it, does not mean that it has not been circulated to the planning board or will not be circulated to the planning board. It was just at some point we had to put a pin in that so that way we could prepare for the hearing.
Okay. And Allison, if I leave anything out, please jump in. And
you know I will. I'm very rude like that.
As always appreciated.
And with that, we are at 6:30.
Okay. Lisa, can we record this or is that not allowed?
It is actually recorded on YouTube. If you would like me to record it within our within this meeting, I can as well.
Yeah, why don't we wait a second to do that and then we can get started.
Okay, so I'm going to hit record in this.
Okay, great.
Okay, that wasn't your voice, was it, Lisa?
No,
Yeah,
that was pretty professional.
All right, good evening, everyone. If you've been watching since 6 o'clock, welcome back. This could be a long meeting. This is a public hearing for Mather Hospital, a site plan amendment. Cindy, if you just want to read in the particulars for the record on the application.
Mather Hospital, 75 North Country Road, site plan amendment. Application number 0614-21, location 75 North Country Road, Suffolk County Tax Map number, section 17, block 3, lots 3.2 and 3.3, zoning PO professional office, applicant Mather Northwell Hospital, property owner Mather Northwell Hospital, contact Anthony Guardino as counsel, care of Farrell Fritz PC. Description, Emergency Department and Surgical Services Expansion Master Plan. Action is public hearing postponed from February 10th, 2022.
Thank you, Cindy. Before we get started, I'm going to just let everybody know we've got a stenographer who's going to be doing a transcript, and we also have a recording going to help the stenographer. So I think we've got this covered. The important thing is that we're on 2 platforms right now. We're on YouTube and Zoom, and the links are on the village's website. But if you want to make a comment on the project and would like the board to hear your comment, you need to remove yourself. If you're watching on YouTube, remove yourself from YouTube and switch over to Zoom, because we don't have the ability on YouTube to handle comments. When you make a comment, and this is going to be after a presentation by the applicant's going to go through the basics of the project, where they are to date in the preparation of documents. The planning board staff will then talk about some of the comments that we've had on what's been submitted so far. There will be questions from the board, and then following that, we'll be entertaining public comment. I'm going to first start by noting that we've already received a bunch of comments. As you may have heard just a minute or 2 ago, there are a bunch more that came in just before this meeting, based on the knowledge that there would be a meeting, I guess, and the fact that the applicant posted signs on the property as required that there would be a public hearing tonight. So we actually have a large number of comments that came in the last week. I have a summary. I'm going to talk about a summary of comments we've received through February 24th. And we're going to talk about that along with a summary of what the comments were about and what different topics people commented on, just to set the stage. I see we have 42 people who are watching on Zoom. I'm sure some people are just watching. Others are the contingent from the applicant, which will enter the room shortly to do a presentation. And others, I'm sure, are people who would like to comment. If you've commented prior and sent in a written comment, it will be considered, including all the comments since February 24th, which we've received, will be collected, and the comment period will not end tonight. So we'll talk about when that will be extended to as well. An important thing when you want to make a comment on Zoom, you'd like to make a comment, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of the screen on Zoom rather than the chat, because there's just not enough, there's too much going on for the staff to actually read the chat while they're looking for people raising hands and entering and asking to enter the room. I'll go over this again, but when people make comments, the stenographer will swear you in, unless you're an attorney. Attorneys do not require to be sworn in for public comment. And you'll need to give your name and address before you're sworn in. Okay, I think I've covered everything. Cindy, possibly maybe just talk about your email address for written comments after this evening's meeting.
Yes, so written comments can be sent to csuarez@portchef.com. That's CSUAREZ@portchef.com. And I will respond. I respond as I receive them, that I've received it.
Okay, that's good to know that you've actually have it and have a record of it. Lisa, if you could start admitting the applicant's contingent into the room, that would be good. And we can get started.
It's Anthony Gordino. See if I can find them all here.
Good evening, Anthony.
Good evening. How are you?
All right, good. You?
Well, thank you. Nice to see you all.
The boxes on the screen are going to get dramatically smaller in short fashion. We're all going to shrink. I see we now have 42 people in the waiting room, so that gives you an idea of. I assume we're going to get some comments from people.
So Lisa, we also need Andrew Kelly.
All right, so I just promoted him, and do you have
Winkleman, Dan Winkleman.
Winkleman.
Okay.
Bill Wolfert also.
Bill Wolfert.
Okay.
You got Dan Winkleman too, right? That's important.
Yeah. Yeah. I will find him. Here he is.
Matt Matera.
Okay, so am I missing anyone now?
So if you could allow Andrew Kelly to be able to present his screen, if that's a different function.
Okay, he should be able to present his screen.
Yep, I have it here. I'm just pulling it up now.
Lisa, when somebody presents and you share screen, that's visible on YouTube as, I mean, there's nothing special on YouTube, correct?
Yes, they'll be able to see it on YouTube as well. Obviously,
Okay.
the people will be less visible.
Okay, before we, if everyone's in, I think probably the best thing to do is one by one state your name and address, and then our stenographer will swear you in collectively. That's probably the best way to do it. Since this is the first official public hearing, you need to be sworn in. Even though we had a bit of a presentation the last time. I do see chats, someone chatting. If you want to be admitted to the room to comment, that will be done one by one after the presentation at the appropriate time. Please don't use the chat because we can't monitor the chat at the same time as everything else that's going on. So I don't know if you want to go, maybe you want to take the, would you mind taking the presentation off for a second? And we'll go to full screen, and then one by one, as you view yourself on the screen, maybe if we're all seeing each other in the same order, maybe that's the way to introduce everyone from Mather Hospital with respect to this presentation. So Anthony, if you could start, and then
Yes,
we'll
Anthony Guardino, Local Land Use Council from Farrell Fritz.
Courtney Riley, 100 Motor Parkway, Hauppauge, New York, from VHB Engineering.
Daniel Winkleman of VHB Engineering, 100 Motor Parkway, Hauppauge, New York, traffic engineer. Andrew Kelly with VHB Engineering, 100 Motor Parkway, Hauppauge, New York.
Bill
Wayne
Wolpert with,
Shaddis.
oh, go ahead, Wayne.
Wayne Shaddis, Vice President of Mather Hospital, 75 North Country Road.
Bill Wolpert with E4H Architecture, 185 Talcott Road, Williston, Vermont.
Okay. Lorraine, it's up to you to swear in. Oh, you're muted.
I got it. Would you all raise your right hand except Mr. Giardino, of course? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth, nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Okay, thank you very much. I
Probably
guess
also should have said affirm, but that's okay, right?
say again?
I probably also should have said affirm, but that's all right, right? If sworn.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Anthony, if you want to,
Sure.
I guess you're going to do the intro.
Yes. So good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Anthony Guardino. I represent Northwell at Mather Hospital in connection with its request to have this planning board approve its pending site plan application, which proposes to expand and relocate the emergency department and surgical services departments and undertake certain future improvements as part of a master plan. To assist in the presentation, you heard our team. We have Courtney Riley and Andrew Kelly, Dan Winkleman, all from VHB. Dan is the first two are engineer. Well, I guess Courtney's an engineer. I think Andrew Kelly, landscape architect. Dan Winkleman is a traffic engineer, and then Bill Wolpert is our architect. There are a number of experts in various other disciplines that are standing by to assist with the presentation or to respond to any questions or comments from the board or from the public. And in addition to Wayne Shaddis, we have several representatives of Mather Hospital and Northwell Health who are monitoring this meeting, and they stand ready to answer any hospital-related questions if necessary. So just by way of some brief background, and I know you're all familiar with this, but just for purposes of the record, Mather Hospital operates from a 39-acre campus, which is located at 75 North Country Road. That property is located in the village's professional office district. That's the PO district. The hospital has been part of the Port Jefferson community since 1929 and became part of the Northwell Health System in 2018. The hospital campus, as presently configured, contains several buildings. There is the main hospital building. There's a freestanding thrift shop building. There's a medical office building. There's a learning center. There's a mechanical building. And there's a small service building that is associated with the existing health. All of these buildings are served by surface parking lots located throughout the campus. And there is currently a total of 1,165 parking spaces that are on the site to serve these buildings. There are also several trails that are located on portions of Mather's private property that the hospital has generously allowed members of the community to use. However,
Excuse me, Mr. Giardino, sometimes you're fading out. Is
that any better? Is that better?
Yeah.
I apologize. Let me just look and see if I can make sure I have the right microphone on it. Sorry. Yeah, that's the best microphone I have here. Okay. All right. I'll speak louder if that.
All right, great. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry. So again, so these trails that are on property, the hospital has generously allowed the public to use, but I just want to be very clear because it's heard throughout the comments that I received. These are not public walking trails, as many have characterized them to be. Instead, they are part of the land that Mather has held for a long time, and they've held that property until such time that it is needed for hospital purposes, and that time is now. Mather is requesting site plan approval from the planning board to allow for the hospital expansion and some future site improvements that are demanded by the constant evolution of technologies and services that improve healthcare and patient services. Fortunately, hospitals don't operate the way they did in 1929, when this was a single building. In reality, hospitals don't even operate the same way they did 10 years ago. Technologies and treatments change constantly, and that creates the need for new equipment and new services, and that in turn requires more space. Mather is now at a juncture where it simply needs more space in order to meet its mission. And its mission is providing the highest quality clinical care, educating the current and future generations of healthcare professionals, promoting health education, and caring for the community. That is its mission, and everything that they're doing here, or that they're proposing to do, is in furtherance of that mission. It is prepared to invest approximately $80 million to make the improvements that are necessary to deliver the finest healthcare possible to the residents of the village and the surrounding areas. I have read the emails and letters in opposition that were submitted by local residents and others, many of which appear to be a form email or form letter because they say a lot of the same things and actually are written in the same way. But I remind all of the people who are in opposition that a hospital is an expressly permitted use in the PO district. This is not a situation where it's a special permit or conditional use that's subject to certain criteria, or this is not a situation where the hospital needs variance relief. It only needs site plan approval from this board. That's it. And I would also point out that courts have, held consistently that inherently beneficial land uses that promote the health, safety, and welfare of a community are entitled to deferential treatment under zoning. I submit it's hard to imagine a land use that is more beneficial to a community's health, safety, and welfare than a hospital. The project is divided into 4 distinct phases. Phase 1 is expected to have a construction duration of approximately 24 months, and it includes the following activities: the emergency department expansion and fit out, the surgical services expansion, and that would just be the shell only, the heliport relocation, the northern parking area expansion, and a new surface parking lot to the east of the existing building. There are other improvements that Courtney Riley and others will go through, installation of a new traffic signal, new sidewalks, relocation of a bus stop, additional landscaping, etc. Following the completion of phase 1, the hospital will provide 1,328 parking spaces, which is more than is required by the village code. Phase 2 is expected to have a construction duration of approximately 12 months and includes the following: the interior fit out of the shell for the surgical services area and the renovation of the existing surgical services area. In phase 3, which includes the main lobby expansion and drop-off area, there is no specific time frame, and it's anticipated to begin at least 10 years after the start of phase 1. That is expected to take approximately 12 months to complete. Phase 4, includes the potential construction of a parking deck, which, if ever needed, would be built above the new surface parking that is proposed under phase 1. As this board is aware, the Mather team has been working with the village and its planning staff over a year to tweak and improve the site plan that was originally submitted back in December of 2020. During that time, the site plan has been revised several times in order to address the various comments and concerns that were raised. At one point during the process, the Mather application was referred by the planning board to the zoning board in order to obtain a variance from the village's table of clearing standards, which limits the clearing of natural vegetation to no greater than 65%. Natural vegetation is defined in the village code as existing and naturally occurring indigenous vegetation. Some may be surprised to learn that natural vegetation does not include areas that are landscaped with trees, shrubs, and flowers, or lawns. But it should also not include large areas such as the one that was a farm field. And Andrew, if you wouldn't mind, could you put up the aerial from 1984? You can see from this aerial, and there's the overlay on it, there was a large farm field just less than 40 years ago. And that farm field now has been overgrown with a variety of opportunistic invasive species. And then a large part of the area that is to be cleared, at least by under this application, was also previously cleared for use by behavioral health patients pursuant to an approved site plan by this village. So a lot of the area that people are concerned about that being cleared actually was cleared, and you can see that very clearly from this aerial photograph. In any event, as Courtney Riley is going to explain, Mather will not actually be clearing and paving 65% of the site. In fact, much of the site will be attractively landscaped with vegetative buffers, planting beds, and other green spaces. But unfortunately, these buffers and attractive landscaping are only considered vegetation, but not considered natural vegetation. They don't count for purposes of this calculation. Fortunately, the zoning board understood the impact that the natural vegetation clearing limits placed on this hospital and unanimously granted Mather's application for a variance back in November of 2021. This decision allows the planning board to approve Mather's site plan as currently presented. The village board also adopted several code amendments relating to the minimum size of parking spaces and the configuration of helipads that obviated the need for additional approvals by Mather. The application was also referred to the planning board, by the planning board to the village's architectural review committee, which responded in a memo dated February 1st of 2022. And I quote, "The committee largely approves of the massing and conceptual designs proposed and finds them both appropriate and promising." To address the comments and concerns that were raised by the planning board during the many public work sessions, Mather made a number of plan modifications and concessions that will result in both on-site and off-site improvements that will benefit not only the hospital and its patients, but also the community in general. In a few minutes, I'm going to call upon Courtney Riley to provide an overview of the proposed site plan and to highlight the on-site improvements, including the much discussed drainage improvements that addressed the specific comments and concerns raised by the board. With respect to the recharge basin, Mather has agreed to make improvements to the basin after all new drainage structures are installed on the site, and we received the information from the village as to the extent of the amount of village water that is being discharged into that basin. You will recall that there is an existing drainage easement that allows the village to connect one catch basin to the recharge basin, but the village has apparently tied in many other catch basins for which no drainage easement or other permission exists. In fact, the village retained the services of R&M Engineering to study the village's drainage infrastructure in the vicinity of Mather's recharge basin and to determine the amount of village water that is discharging into the basin. And in a letter that we just received the other day, it's dated February 25th, 2022, R&M concluded that nearly 6 acres of village roadway are tributary to the Mather recharge basin. That is a far cry from the single catch basin that Mather allowed to be connected. R&M has not completed its work, and Mather and the village have a few things to iron out with respect to the easement going forward. But to ensure that the recharge basin improvements are ultimately completed, Mather understands and accepts that the completion of the basin improvements would be made a condition of the certificate of occupancy for the emergency department and surgical services addition, and the improvements would be secured by a bond. Next, I will call upon traffic engineer Dan Winkleman to provide an overview of the on-site and off-site traffic improvements that Mather has agreed to make at the request of the planning board, and explain how these improvements will improve traffic circulation, the walkability of the site, and its accessibility by bus. And then last but not least, I'm going to ask Mather's architect, Bill Wolpert, to walk the board and the public through the color renderings showing the improvements that are proposed for the hospital buildings. And thereafter, of course, we would be happy to answer any questions that the board members, as well as any questions that may arise during the public comment portion. So I'd like to introduce Courtney Riley at this point. Courtney.
Good evening, planning board members. My name is Courtney Riley. I am the director of the Land Development and Civil Engineering Department here at VHB. It should be noted that this is a master plan, and Northwell will only be seeking building permits for phase 1 at this time. If and when further phases are requested, these applications would have to be further designed and will be under separate submissions and separate building permits. So to reiterate what is in this actual first phase, again, we have the emergency department relocation and the fit out of the surgical services expansion. The building is going to be a shell space only for those surgical services. Currently, the emergency department is located at the south side of the hospital and located in front. The expansion is approximately 48,000 gross floor area, and our project architect, as Anthony mentioned, will be presenting further on in the presentation.
Excuse me, Courtney,
Yeah.
is it possible to zoom in on that a little bit so that it shows up a little bit bigger on screens? Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, and yes, Mr. Chairman, and when I actually go the next part of the presentation, we're going to start at Beltaire. We're going to work away all the way around, so we can zoom in further into each part. Okay. Perfect.
Very good.
So, so we're going to be relocating the heliport. Currently, there is a heliport located on site, and it'll be will be relocated so it aligns now with our new expansion. We have a northern parking area. We also have a surface lot to the east of the existing hospital. We're going to have an installation of a traffic signal at Bilthorn Way. This is the main hospital entrance on North Country Road. It's going to have pedestrian amenities such as crosswalks and curb cuts. Additionally, there's landscaping along Beltaire, and throughout all of our improvements, there's landscaping. There's going to be a physician parking that's going to be relocated because the physician parking that exists today is where our new expansion is going to be. And we're going to have a dedicated area for the hospital's maintenance area that's going to be a covered maintenance enclosure. That is phase 1. And our phase 2 is going to be that surgical fit out. That's an interior fit out. Phase 3 would be a main lobby and infill. As you can see, the building kind of has a triangle to it, and we would infill there, as well as an updated drop-off area. And phase 4 would be a potential parking deck. So again, this is just a master plan. Northwell is only seeking permits for this phase 1, and we're going to go through exactly what's there. So Andrew, if you could zoom in to starting at Beltaire. Now, as Anthony mentioned, Dan Winkleman from my team, my colleague, is going to be speaking about all those off-site improvements. So as you see some of that line work off-site, whether it be on Beltaire or down down by the main entrance, he's going to further go into that. So starting here at Beltaire Road, this is the existing entrance, and this existing entrance is going to be maintained. You can see landscaping has been added along not only the front of Beltaire, this is complementing some of the existing landscaping that's there, but also adding more, as well as the parking lot. So that, again, with emergency department, it's imperative that the doctors have a separate parking lot specifically for emergency department so they could get to the patients as quick as possible. This is an existing lot. This existing lot is now going to have a gated access, and where there's no curbs, it will now have curbs. And it's relocated from where, right underneath where that the proposed expansion is. In order for the patients to get into the ED, they'll come again through that main entrance. They would turn south, and it's a one-way entrance in front of the expansion. So again, the cars would come in. This has a provided drop-off area. It's a one-way entrance. There's enough adequate space for a car to either park or pass through. And if a car needs to pass through, so someone could drop off their loved ones, there's also, you'll see a whole nother parking space to the left-hand side of that. And that's for ED parking. So we're gonna have valet parking there. If someone wants to park their own car, they could go north to the parking lot. Or if they want to go to the selected ED parking lot, this is so someone, again, can drop off their loved one. They want to get them unloaded, but they want to park really quickly. You don't have to go find parking. You don't want to use valet for whatever reason. this makes it as quick as possible to someone to drop off at park and get to their loved one. This is through a controlled access through a guard booth located right there. The ambulances were going to be separate. Okay, so we don't have pedestrians or patients or anyone where the ambulances are going to be. So the ambulances, when they come in, they come up and they come through this area, also one way, and they're able to back into the ED. By separating these two, again, it's for safety concerns for not only vehicles, but also pedestrians. You'll notice here on the parking to the north, that is actually parking to the north that's been eliminated. So currently right now, there's 78 stalls that actually all park and face north towards the residences and towards the water authority that have been removed. And a drive aisle has been added as long with existing pavement. So this is approximately about 425 feet away. And we're moving it actually further because and you'll see in one of our later plans that the parking stalls are actually closer to what we're proposing. There's also 5.5 foot retaining wall that's added to the north as there is a grade change there. The heliport, as mentioned before, has been relocated. So in order for when someone comes in or out of the hospital or needs to go via the helicopter, this heliport has to be right across from the hospital itself and from that emergency entrance. So we've created this, we've just relocated it north so that when a patient is being transferred, we get them there as quick as possible. This is an at-grade helipad, and it was consistent, relatively consistent with what is there today. It's just being relocated. Next, you'll see there's where the solar facility is. This is an existing solar facility. We've dedicated this area to hospital maintenance vehicles. It was one of the planning staff's comments that a lot of the maintenance vehicles, were in the way of whether it be patient or employee parking, and that an area be dedicated. So this area has been added. This area is about 420 feet from the residences, and you can see around it, we take 22 feet of that and we add back in regrading and then landscaping that area around it. We've also added some parking in that area, as you'll see as well, and I'll go through that in a second. It should be noted that above that maintenance area, the remaining area will stay natural. So there's over 8 acres that's staying natural. We are not going any further than it's already there. If you see the solar facility, so that's really easy because solar facilities are there. That's an existing, that we're not going any further than that. So as we go through, you'll see kind of dashed lines where there's a trail entrance. So where this trail entrance is a little bit further down. And we have relocated this trail entrance. And what you see there is that we've added parking stalls, not only for our employees, but the visitors of that trail. So now there's, while it's going to be mixed parking, you do have a safe space to enter the trail that exists there today. This existing trail is on Mather's property. It's about 630 feet long, and we are removing about 15% of it just at that entrance and relocating it closer up where there would be a safer space to enter that trail, rather it be kind of in the middle of a parking lot. The parking lot has been extended east, and you'll see, and we'll get into, I know there's a lot of questions about the clearing, and I'll get into that later. So you can see this parking lot has been expanded and as well as to the south of the helipad. So where the helipad was is where now we've added parking stalls instead. There is an 18-foot grade difference between that north parking lot and the south parking lot. So if you've been to Mather, you've probably seen that area. It has regrown with an invasive species, and it will be regraded. So we've had two retaining walls there, approximately between 5 and 6 feet. This is going to be able to stabilize the slope during heavy storms. This has washed away, and so now we're repairing this entire area. We are going to put 2 retaining walls between 5 and 6 feet. Also, to include this stabilize this area, we're going to be putting down a meadow mix to ensure that this stays stabilized as well. as to ensure that no more invasive species goes there. You'll see a red dash line that denotes the potential future parking deck. This is not included in the first phase of work. And again, due to this grade change, you'll notice that essentially the bottom of that parking deck, if ever built, would be similar to the south parking lot. And the top of that parking deck would be similar to the top lot grade-wise. It's about 18 feet, again, difference. Again, this is not part of this phase, and if and when the parking deck was to be done in the future, the plans would have to be further developed. Those would be provided by the village, reviewed, and have to be approved. This parking deck is also limited by the path of the helicopter. You'll see these blue lines on our plan. So what we've done here is that we've already went to the FAA and we've spoken to them and received their approval for the helipad. And this path has been what has been discussed with them. And the reason this path was chosen is that we heard a lot of the neighbors' complaints about helicopters coming over their properties to the north or to the east. And now this is the approved path for the helicopter. If any parking deck was need to be raised or if it was going to be any higher, we wouldn't be able to have this here. And so that's why we've not only selected this helipad path, but also we've limited our parking deck height. Also, as part of this phase one, we have this surface lot to the south. This is again where you can see that dark gray that's going to be added. It's about 84 spaces. Going further down, we've also added some curbs, and at Billhorn Way, which is essentially our entrance, you can see a pedestrian path. So currently right now, there is no sidewalk along North Country Road. So we've added over 550 linear feet of sidewalk along North Country Road. This sidewalk now will then enter and go straight to the hospital. There are existing parking spaces there, and that's going to now be landscaped and add a safe pedestrian way. The sidewalk again will be brought in by this new traffic signal and pedestrian crossings. Dan will talk about that further in the presentation. Phase 3 of the project, if it went forward, would be again this lobby infill and minor updates to the drive aisle and drop off. The off-site improvements, again, we'll go through by Dan. So let's talk a little about landscaping. The subject property, and Andrew, if you could go kind of back up to Beltaire, the subject property will feature native and adaptive drought-tolerant plantings throughout the entire property, as well as evergreen plantings, and as well as having automatic irrigation systems in lawn areas. So this doesn't exist in a lot of parts of the project, the existing areas, and it was one of the things that Mather really wanted to do was to ensure that with, have you seen in some of their other expansions, that they have a lot of landscaping. Over 70 evergreens are going to be planted up towards Beltaire. These are going to have an installed height of between 7 and 8 feet. It's a variety of species from green giants, emerald greens. These can have a mature height from 50 to 60 feet. Emerald greens could have a mature height of 12 to 14 feet, and they're all native and adaptive. This will help from any screening from Beltaire and looking in to where our proposed expansion is going to be. As we mentioned, the automatic irrigation system will have rain sensors, and all the planted areas that we're proposing will have an irrigation system, as well as and this is more for the prolonged periods of drought, as we have selected a lot of plants that are drought tolerant. This means that we don't need as much water for those types of plantings, but during droughts or during the summertime when we need it, we have the irrigation there to help support the growth. Foundation plantings have also been added around the building, and landscaping has been added to the parking areas to increase shade. The meadow mix that I mentioned before is going to be between that north and that south lot. Again, it's going to stabilize the slope between the walls. It's going to be native plants, grasses, perennial flowers, and it's going to replace that invasive species we talked about further. So parking will be spoken through with Dan, and he's going to go into the village code requirements as well as what Mather needs. And again, it should be noted that most of this area, you know, and the parking that's going to be provided is a lot in existing areas. For the lighting, the proposed lighting has been designed in accordance with dark sky requirements, as well as all the requirements per the village code. While it's important, you know, this is, we do need lighting for the visibility, safety, and security of the hospital. Cutoffs of the lights have been added. So a cutoff is when a light is shining, and then you could put a cutoff on the back or the sides of that light so that the light doesn't spill out over to anywhere else. And the light is only directed towards the parking stalls. So cutoffs have been added to all of the lighting. So any lighting that is added has that cutoff. So it's only directed light. So Andrew, if we could switch to the next slide. So this is a picture in 1962. The area was mostly farmland, completely disturbed. You can see where the hospital was and where the DRA that still exists was. On the next page, you'll see what we brought up before with Anthony, which is the 1984. And so what we've done is we've actually put our site plan over this 1984, and you could see that where we're proposing actually is not been cleared and never was cleared. It just actually existed that way, and a lot of the land has grown back with native and invasive species. So as Anthony mentioned, we went before the planning board a couple months ago, and it was determined that the drainage reserve area, the solar facility area, the 2 acres between those parking lots, that all of that was not natural. So again, to go back to Anthony's point earlier in the presentation, the way the code reads is that if it's previously disturbed, that it's not a natural area. So all your landscape areas and the DRA area, none of that, because it's disturbed, it's not a natural area. So if we go to the clearing plan, so this is what it looks like today, right? So a lot of this has grown back, and this is what it looks like today. So if we zoom in here, the purple area is essentially the extent of the impervious area, meaning that you'll see that purple area is where everything is impervious today. So let's kind of zoom in to the yellow area. That's been a lot of topic of discussion. This area over by the yellow is the vegetation that is going to be taken down. This is 1.72 acres, okay? This is the only land that's not disturbed already that is going to be removed from site in order to expand the parking lot, add the parking for the trail, add the new trail entrance, and the maintenance area. Switching to the drainage, existing today, the entire, are you going to the next one? I'll wait till that loads. Okay, so you'll see on our map, we have areas broken out, A, B, C, D, and E, okay? So this is based on how the water flows across the site. Existing today, all of those areas, everything, the entire site, grades towards that drainage reserve area and enters there by surface flow. So every single one of these areas are going there. As part of these this application, area A and B have drainage added to it. What we've included in that, so you see B, what we've included in that is all the surface water that's coming from the acres, the 8 acres that's above us, we are taking on and storing within B. So we have different types of storage. We have leaching basins, and we also have a storm trap system. This is essentially goes into the ground, goes into catch basins like you'd see in a parking lot, goes into whether it be a dry well, so that has it's a cylindrical where it holds the water and then leaches out into the ground, or a storm trap system, which is again a concrete structure that holds the water and then leaches into the ground. So all the areas in A, C, and D are now being taken out of that drainage reserve area. So that drainage reserve area that is currently taking on all of this has now been removed. That's over 134,000 cubic feet of storage that this project is adding and now taking out of that drainage reserve area. So to put that in perspective, the current drainage reserve area only holds 137,000 cubic feet. So that little drainage reserve area holds 137,000 cubic feet. We are adding into the ground 134,000 cubic feet. So all the 8 acres above us, as well as all those improved areas in A and B, are now being improved to meet the village requirements, as well as the New York State DEC SWIP requirement of a 100-year storm. Now let's talk about E, right? E, we fall short of. So after taking all of that, and where you can see E, where we're not really touching much of the site at all of that's still going to go to that drainage reserve area. We're short in that drainage reserve area, after taking all of this out, 37,000 cubic feet. So we've met with Mather, we've met with the village, we've gone through this with a lot of the planning staff, and we've already agreed to improve that drainage area to ensure that it takes all of the 37,000 cubic feet that it can't hold today, or can't hold in this proposed scenario. So that means that Mather will hold 100% of its stormwater on site, whether it be in that drainage reserve area, in a storm trap system, in a leaching galley system, and within all of our drainage, okay? We've also worked with the village and found out that there's an easement, that there's one catch basin. So Andrew, if you could switch to the next slide. All right. So here's the one catch basin. There's an easement from this one catch basin that goes north into our drainage reserve area. And this is at the high side of the road. So Mather had agreed to handle this one catch basin on the high side of the road, because on the other side of the road, it's lower, that they would take on some of the village roadway. After working with the village for the past several months, it's been discovered that it may not be one catch basin and maybe many more. As Anthony has mentioned, R&M has done a study. It's still preliminary. We received it this week, and they have determined that almost 6 acres of town roadways are connecting into this one catch basin. And that if we were to increase the DRA to handle all of that, we need an additional 50,000 cubic feet of storage to handle that. So again, the overall project is going to be adding 171 cubic storage. We're going to be handling all of that area to the north. We've already committed and working with the village on expanding this drainage area to ensure that Mather Hospital is meeting all of the village requirements, as well as the New York State DEC SWIP requirements. And we're going to continue to work with the village to talk about whether it be this one catch basin or other catch basins that the village is entering into our drainage reserve area. The Northwell team is committed to improving the drainage reserve area and to continuing to work with the village on this matter. This completes my testimony. Myself and other members of VHB are here to answer your questions after our whole presentation. And Dan, if you want to take it away, you're up next.
Great. Can you please allow me to share my screen? I think that I'm able to now. All right. Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Daniel Winkleman, and I am the Transportation Systems Team Leader at VHB's office located at 100 Motor Parkway in Hauppauge, New York. As mentioned by Mr. Guardino, I was retained by the applicant to conduct a detailed traffic impact and parking study for the project. And in doing so, I worked very closely with the village in developing the scope for the study. And I also attended several planning board work sessions where I obtained feedback from the board and staff on the elements to be included in the study. The study included looking at 11 area intersections and 3 of the site's driveways. The aerial exhibit here better depicts the study intersections, which are highlighted with the red circles, and the site, which is highlighted in yellow. The study intersections were primarily along North Country Road between Main Street and Crystal Brook Hollow, and Beltaire Road between the site's northernmost driveway and North Country Road. Main Street between Stony Hill Road and Linden Place, and Oakland Avenue between North Country Road and Perry Street were also portions of the study. Due to the location of the project within the village, it is known that traffic volumes can be much different at different times of the year. Therefore, we looked at both typical summertime conditions as well as non-summertime conditions. During both of these analysis periods, we collected traffic volumes on a typical weekday between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. and between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m., as well as on a typical Saturday between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. These count times were developed to capture the peak commuter, shopper, and hospital activities in the area. All traffic data was collected pre-COVID. As part of my work, we also coordinated very closely with the village to make sure our future condition traffic analyses, meaning our no build and build condition analyses, incorporated traffic from other planned developments in the area, as well as the village's comprehensive plan for Upper Port Jefferson. It's important that I mention the project would modernize and right-size functions of the hospital, such as the emergency department and the surgical areas. Due to today's modern medical equipment, additional space is needed for such uses. Based upon information received from the hospital, the number of new staff and visitors would be fairly minimal. This is because the new uses would not generate large increases in the number of visitors or staff. Even during peak times, it's anticipated that there would be only 33 new vehicle trips generated by the project. This would be approximately 1 trip every 2 minutes. Increases in traffic of this magnitude would not be expected to impact traffic conditions significantly. While traffic conditions would not be expected to change much based upon the small increases in traffic, there are known issues at the site that exist within the study area and along the site's access, particularly along North Country Road, as well as general congestion along the site's frontage in proximity to the intersection of Beltaire Road at North Country Road and North Country Road at Main Street. Therefore, we looked at this area very closely. Based upon the results of the traffic analyses that were conducted, the majority of the study intersections will continue to operate at levels of service consistent with the no-build condition. There were only 2 exceptions where the level of service changed. Therefore, these 2 locations were identified for mitigation. The first was the site's access along North Country Road. The southbound exiting movement from the site currently operates at level of service F, and the vehicle delay would worsen considerably after the project is completed. To mitigate this impact, the installation of a traffic signal was considered and a traffic signal warrant analysis was conducted. VHB conducted the warrant analyses as part of our study, and it was determined that 2 of the 9 applicable warrants outlined in the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices was in fact met. Therefore, the installation of a traffic signal at the site's access was considered and analyzed. Based upon our analyses, it was determined that the installation of a traffic signal would actually significantly improve conditions for traffic exiting the site, and that traffic flow along North Country Road would not be significantly impacted. Because the new signal will be located in close proximity to the existing traffic signal at the intersection of Beltaire Road, it was further proposed to interconnect the new traffic signal with the existing traffic signal so progression through the signals could be coordinated. Detailed timing plans with offsets were also developed to ensure the two intersections would operate well together and that they would not cause further congestion within the study area. To further reduce the possibility of congestion in the area, the site's access along North Country Road, we are proposing to restripe it along North Country Road to allow designated eastbound left to provide a designated eastbound left turn lane. This would eliminate the potential for an eastbound vehicle waiting to make a left turn into the site from blocking an eastbound through vehicle along North Country Road. There would be two receiving lanes exiting the site along North Country Road, as well as to accept the exiting traffic from the campus. The exit from the campus would also be modified to provide a designated left turn lane, as well as a shared left, right, and through lane. This will help the traffic more easily exit the campus and would allow more green time to be allocated to North Country Road. The access was also be reconfigured with crosswalks to cross North Country Road, as well as the site's access, which is referred to as Billhorn Way. And pedestrian signals would be installed to allow safer pedestrian movements across North Country Road. The plan also encompasses shared bike lane markings and new pavement markings throughout, as well as updates to the signage within the area. And it also provides for easier, more identifiable, updated pavement markings through this entire area. The applicant has also agreed to include a GPS-based emergency vehicle preemption system at the new traffic signal and would upgrade the preemption systems at the two adjacent signalized intersections to the east and west. This would certainly improve emergency vehicle response times within the study area. And the plan also proposes, as Ms. Riley noted, sidewalk along the north side of Old Country Road. We also have provided a grass median area so that the sidewalk is set back from the travel lane just to increase safety for pedestrians. The other mitigation recommendation was for the intersection of Perry Street at Main Street. Zoom in here. This Main Street right here, Perry Street right here. Upon implementation of the village's Upper Port Jefferson comprehensive plan, the segment of Perry Street between Oakland Avenue and Main Street would be changed to one-way westbound as opposed to one-way eastbound like it currently exists. This would help traffic filter to the south and would relieve some congestion at the intersections of Main Street and North Country Road and Beltaire Road at North Country Road. Based upon our analyses, it would be recommended that the village's Upper Port comprehensive plan include provisions for the westbound Perry Street approach to be striped as separate left and right turn lanes, as opposed to a single shared left and right turn lane. In regard to off-street parking, there are significant improvements planned for the campus to help increase the parking supply, as well as to improve overall site circulation. As part of our work, we observe existing parking conditions and perform parking projections to identify the number of additional parking spaces needed to accommodate the project, as well as to improve overall parking conditions on the campus. Based upon our parking observations, which were conducted during peak times, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on a typical weekday, 95% of the marked stalls on campus were occupied. This peak occupancy occurred at noon, and occupancy rates this high would certainly indicate the need for additional parking today. Generally speaking, it's desired to have at least 7 to 10% minimum vacancy for good overturn of spaces. This project is only anticipated to increase parking demands on campus by approximately 12 vehicles during peak times. While there is a minimal increase in parking demands, there was a clear need to increase parking supply on campus today just to better accommodate the existing parking demand. Therefore, we have recommended that 163 new parking spaces be created. With these new stalls in place, the occupancy rate during peak times would be estimated at 87% as opposed to 95%. And this would significantly reduce parking congestion on campus, in my opinion. Upon completion of the project, the site would provide a total of 1,328 stalls, and this would exceed the village's parking requirement of 1,291 stalls by just 37 spaces. The project also provides designated spaces for hospital-related vehicles, and therefore they would no longer need to utilize spaces that are designated for employees or visitors, which would be preferred since those spaces can now be freed up for the patients and visitors. The site's layout was also modified as previously summarized so that there would be easy access to the existing and newly proposed parking facilities from both Beltaire Road and North Country Road. The improvements also include a do not block the box markings along Beltaire Road immediately east of the site's access. These markings were to help vehicles exit the site so that they could get into the southbound traffic stream more easily. These markings were also designed so that these circular driveways, which are somewhat on the plan here, so that those residents would be able to more easily enter or exit the driveways. This is a circular driveway here where the entrance is generally on the north side, and now a vehicle could come out more easily due to the do not block the markings. And then on the more southerly side of the do not block the box, the resident could now turn into the driveway more easily and then exit in the southbound direction. We understood there were some concerns with the placement of the sign, and what we've done is we've relocated it a little further north. This is a standard 30 by 30 inch sign and a 24 by 30 inch sign, and it's mounted 7 feet high. So we don't think that this is going to obstruct any driver's view in any way. In conclusion, it's my professional opinion that the proposed project would provide an adequate amount of parking for the future needs of the campus, and that there would be no significant impact to traffic conditions within the study area, given the recommended mitigation measures as described in my study are implemented. At this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to Bill Wilpert, who can talk a little bit more about the architecture on the project. I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to him.
Bill, we're pulling up your renderings right now, but you are on mute. So just give us a second and we're pulling up the architectural renderings.
Okay, thanks for letting me know I'm on mute.
It's 2022, though.
I'll say the first few sentences as that's coming up. But again, good evening, Chairman and members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about the new addition and the architecture involved with this proposed project. Okay, so looks like we're good. This looks like where I wanted to start. Yeah, so Courtney gave us a really nice walkthrough on the pedestrian entrance and the vehicle entrance from the site from Beltaire Road on the west side. As you enter into the site, what you're going to be faced with first is this elevation at the bottom of the page, which is the west elevation of the building. And what I can tell you is we approach this new design with a contemporary approach to our material selections. This is a nice new beginning for the hospital, with a new building, new services, in a emergency department that's really intended to be brought up to modern day standards and modern day issuances of healthcare. So our primary finish on the building is panelized fiber cement panels, and it is a panel system. So it's complete with trims and seals, that sort of thing. Our palette is varied with colors and textures, as you can see in the rendering here. And it's basically formed using a warm white and a natural gray palette of color. So on this image, you can see fiber cement siding panel color 1, which is the lighter color, which is the predominant corner that you would see as you enter into the site. We also have color 2 that you see represented, which is the gray color, and we are proposing to use 2 separate panel finishes. So there is a flush solid panel, and there's also a ribbed panel to give us some texture and change of pattern and massing to the appearance of the building. Also on this elevation, you see the 2 main canopies for the patient entrance of the new ED. That's the one in the center. And you also see to the left side is the one, if you stay on that bottom image. Yep. And the one on the right-hand side is to the existing ambulatory surgery entrance. To the right side of that, or left side of that image, you see the ambulance, and we'll see that a little more clearly on the next image. So we'll pan up to the next one. I'd just like to add too that in addition to the fiber cement panels, we also have an accent with composite metal panel, and that's what you're seeing. It's identified here and noted, but at the stair tower where the cursor is metal panel. And we also decided to break up the large elevation along the pedestrian team entrance with metal panel and a mixture of the metal and fiber cement, just to add and break down the scale of that elevation for those entering. The other thing that you notice in this elevation is the screened enclosure for any HVAC equipment that's on the roof. We have some pieces of air handling equipment, and Mather has made the decision, and we've proposed to provide screening, both from a visual and it'll help with both approaching sight lines as well as pedestrian as you're walking around the building. And we'll go up to the top elevation. The other thing you're going to notice in these elevations is a nice mixture of glass panels and expanses of glass. This is going to be curtain wall that we have at the main entry, as well as some highlighted areas, again, to break up the structure, create some pattern and texture to the building. The canopy that you see here is for the ambulances. So as the ambulance comes in and backs in, patients and staff will be protected as they make their way over to the ambulance entrance that you see on the left-hand side. There's a few overriding dimensions on these plans. The building is roughly 190 foot in width and 202 foot in length. The total square footage of our footprint is 37,000 square feet, plus or minus. We have a 1-story addition, as you see here, and a partial basement. So the number that you heard earlier in the presentation of 46,000 square feet, that includes the partial basement of this facility. And let's go to the next slide. We prepared a few renderings just to give you the sense of what you would be seeing. we've tried to provide these as real imagery as we could. So this is your entrance view coming from Beltaire, where you can see the large white mass that would identify the emergency department. Here you can clearly and quickly identify your emergency entrance as a patient coming in or a family member. Also to the far left or right of the screen, sorry, left, you can see the ambulatory entrance over there. Oh, yep, you're bouncing. There you go. Ambulatory entrance down there. And over to the left is the ambulance. So go to the next image. This brings you in a little closer to the patient drop-off areas. So again, on the right-hand side is the ambulatory entrance drop-off. And the one to the right is our main emergency entrance. And this gives you a good idea of the steel and glass canopy structures that we're looking to provide both protection and a dedicated area of arrival for patients and visitors. And the next one. Now this elevation or rendering provides you with the view from the new patient and staff parking lots. So as you come across where the helipad was, this is the elevation that you would see. Primarily from this entrance would be used by the team or the staff. And the ED entrance is to the, yep, right there on the right-hand side. And that concludes my summary of the architecture and the materials that we're proposing for this application.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation. Obviously, we're available to answer any questions that the board members may have, or then, of course, after the public comment period, we'd like an opportunity to respond. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. I think probably, yeah, I was going to say if we have a site plan, actually the first site plan with the buildings, maybe that's the best one. The one that Courtney started with, I believe. Yeah, and I know you can zoom in on that because there will be questions about different areas of the site. I think we'll start with initial board questions of the applicant's team. Followed by some presentation of the planning board, planning department's review of the project from Jen Siegler, I assume, since Jen is coordinating that. And then subsequent questions at that point. And then after that, we'll move on to public comment. If you're tuning in a little late, please do not use the chat room to be recognized when we get to public comment. I do see, I believe that we had about 43 people in the room, in the Zoom room, which could be either a waiting room for those wishing to make comments or people just watching on Zoom, which is either way. We don't know how many people will comment. I can say right now, I'm leaning toward establishing a 3-minute comment period for each person who wishes to comment, and we will hear all your comments. I will start when we get to that point with instructions on how to do that. But that being said, why don't we start with board questions? I have just a couple, and then we'll poll the board members for their questions on the presentation. I thank you for a very detailed presentation. It was very informative in terms of what the work includes and what's been done to date. Just a couple from me. I know that the emergency department's moving and that the ambulances will come up Beltaire Road and turn right into the site. In terms of noise from sirens, I believe the ambulances pretty much get through the main intersection. A lot of them come from the south, from the east and from the west, and go through the main intersection there, Beltaire Road at North Country Road. I know they turn sirens on to get through the intersections at some point. The lights are always on. So they'll be traveling a little bit further north. How will that affect people on the north side? And when do you anticipate having them turn off the sirens and just go with the lights? I'm assuming that's when they enter the site because the emergency room is moved closer to the north end of the site.
Sure. So after you get through that intersection, at that point, they'll start to turn off their sirens. And just as you mentioned, the lights do stay on once they enter the property. That will all come off, and we've already gone through where they enter.
Okay. Courtney, while you're still on, you had talked about the relocation of the trail at the northeast corner of the site. Could you just trace the location from that
point? So we
point?
have, yeah, Andrew, if you don't mind, we have a different, so the trail itself is about 630 feet long. You could see it here in yellow. The red portion is essentially the part that's going to be removed, and the green portion is the part that's going to be added back. We use this aerial specifically because you could see that the trail actually goes off Mather's property and onto a property not owned by Mather. But this is the existing trail as it sits today.
Okay. And that's just a path, is that correct? Or there's no paving on that?
Correct, just a path.
Okay, so it's a path through the woods that people use. It's a good time to mention that when we reviewed the site plan for PJ Oakland on the south side, directly opposite the hospital on the south side of North Country Road, we actually, and the comment was made by the planning department, and we actually had the applicant build a bit of a paved trail around a portion of the site primarily for employees who work there, who wanted to get out and walk around the site for some exercise. Your aerial probably doesn't go that far down, but that's just a comment. And, personally, I was thinking that might be better to kind of relocate that trail the way it is, particularly since it goes on private property, and actually do something similar on your site. I don't know that you can actually see that. I think it wraps around the south portion of the office site, and you only have the northerly building there, northerly two buildings. I don't believe I have any other questions. So board members. I
would like to ask some questions, please, Ray.
Mm-hmm. And may I go after Barbara?
Sure.
Okay, so one of my questions is, what level trauma center is Mather currently?
I can answer that. We are not a trauma center.
Okay, can I ask what kind of equipment you want to bring into the new emergency department?
Sure. Our current emergency department does not have a CAT scan within the department. So that is standard practice as of today. So it's, X-ray equipment. And that's really only the big major piece of equipment that's within the new emergency department.
Okay. I need somebody to walk me through what you plan to do now. One of the plans I had seen in the past, the north entrance to the parking lot off of Beltaire Road, that is going to be closed off when the construction starts.
So as part of the construction, once construction does start, there will be a phasing plan. We're still working with the Mather team of how to do that, but we will be starting with the parking as well as the drainage. As for the entrance, we're working with the village to see if we can create a separate entrance for construction or use that existing entrance, as we don't want to impede on people coming into the site either. So we're still working with the village on for when we go into construction.
Okay, so what I need to understand is you're going to have a staging area for construction. You're moving the parking lots. Where are the people who currently park in this area going to park? And I'll give you an example. The Medical Arts Building, the entrance to, now you're not touching that parking at all, the Medical Arts Building. However, the only way to get to those parking spaces is right through where you're going to put the new entrance to the emergency room.
So just to be clear, we are not removing or shutting down this entrance at all.
So how are people going to access those parking spaces?
So the same way they do today, through this entrance and around and into the Medical Arts Building.
Okay, but when you construct the part of the emergency department where people come in the one way and then go into the building, at one point, won't you have to rework that lane? And then when you rework that lane, it's going to be difficult for the people at the Medical Arts Building to access their parking spaces?
Yeah, so everything's done in smaller bites and phases. So we would likely be starting again at the furthest side first, okay? And so when we start at the furthest side first, that gives us the opportunity to build the parking available, okay? As the contractors finish each phase, then once that phase is done, that parking and everything's available. And so if you look at it, we're almost starting east to west. When we get to the part where the building is, the parking that's existing there now, everyone would have the parking availability all the way out to the other side on the east side. We're also starting that area because that has the most drainage impact, and that's where we're adding most of the drainage. When we get to the building part where you're speaking about, that would be almost just squared off in that area, right where the building is, as we build the parking, as we build the actual building itself.
Okay, so one of my concerns is that if parking wasn't available to staff, visitors, patients, construction people, that they would be using Westview Avenue as a place to park. Do you see that? Go ahead.
I don't, because again, we're starting with the south parking lot first. So where that south parking lot, that's going to be built first. Then we have to grade that entire area, add those retaining walls, then that part would be built. Then we're going to build the north parking lot. As you can see, that's where the majority of the parking is going to be added. We're also going to be the helipad at the same type. The largest amount of parking is going to be available. When we're actually doing the building, it's really almost a kind of a square right around the building. So by phasing this, that's how we're able to ensure that there'd be enough parking for the employee staff.
Okay, I have a question about the landscaping.
Sure.
I appreciate all the landscaping you're doing around Beltaire Road, along the length.
Yeah.
When somebody enters the northern lot, what happens now is they come, you had it right, okay.
Yeah.
So, good, you have to go to the west.
Yeah, so let's, so Andrew, let's start over by Beltaire and we'll work ourselves east. So
thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. So Beltaire, like I kind of highlighted because I think it's important, right? When you drive up Beltaire and you're going north, there's some significant amount of vegetation, and then it opens up, right? It's pretty wide open. If you're driving up Beltaire and you look right, you can see everything. And now we're building an emergency department, and that's why we added all this screening. And that obviously was one of your comments that we had addressed as part of this application. So we're adding about 70 of those evergreens there. Now, as you move in, one of the other comments that we had talked about in the work session was seeing those ambulances, right?
Mhm.
So
Yes.
we also added vegetation there as well to help screen the ambulances when they actually sit there. You can see a lot of this vegetation, and again, it's hard to get into detail of it and when you're doing the overall presentation, but you can see how much landscaping that we're adding. Everywhere we're touching that parking lot, we're adding landscaping. And as then we move further east, even into the new parking lot, another one of your suggestions and recommendations as we move into the larger parking lot was to add a little bit more landscaping as well with landscaped islands.
Okay, so one little more recommendation.
Okay.
If you go back west.
Sure.
Where the, I'll wait for you to get there. Okay, so driving into that northern entrance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, right where that parking is, the for the emergency, yes, right
Yep.
there. On the plan, it said that what is going to be planted is Carex eye stands, which is an ornamental grass. So when I looked it up on the website, it said that it grows 12 to 14 inches. And during the winter, it suggested, some of the websites suggest that it's cut back. So what happens is when you come down this entrance to the parking lot, and where you see that cross of the square, right,
Yep.
right there, there's essentially nothing to tone down the cars that are going to be parking head in there. So is there a different plant that you can put there that will be evergreen and will grow at least 3 feet tall?
Yeah, so the hard thing is, and this is where so the project itself, the grade change from where the existing building is all the way up to the north, there's like 5 to 6 feet in grade difference, right? So now we put the building in and it's at that elevation. We have to, you can kind of see all these retaining walls that we have. We can certainly look to see if maybe there would be a plant that's evergreen. The problem is that we have a retaining wall that's kind of highlighted in green right there that might not be able to fit a lot. And it's in, so we can certainly look at it. But we do have a small retaining wall there due to the grade change of the building.
So you're saying that the valet parking for the emergency department is slightly higher than the road?
No, it's actually lower. So the whole is actually about 5 feet lower in grade.
So when you're coming in that northern entrance and you look straight ahead and you see cars there, the cars are actually about 5 feet lower than what you're looking at.
Yeah, give or take, it's lower. Yep.
Okay, then perhaps, well, I'm hoping for something evergreen, because if these Carex eye stands plants sounded so nice, I think I'm going to buy some for myself. But I would love to see something that doesn't die during the winter or needs to be cut back, something that is evergreen. Doesn't have to grow tall, but something that's evergreen.
All right, so we'll take a look. We got about 2 feet, and I am looking at our plans right now. So the elevation at Beltaire is at elevation 215. The elevation of where those parking stalls are actually at 203. So it's actually a 10-foot grade difference. That whole area is much lower.
Okay, I'm very much surprised. Okay.
Hopefully pleasantly.
Yes. All right, there were, I think in the presentation, a lot of my questions were answered. I would like to know, even though Mather is not a trauma center now, would you work towards it becoming a trauma center in the future?
I don't see that in any time in the near future. Stony Brook is a regional 1 trauma center, and typically you don't have multiple trauma centers close to one another because you need the volume to be good at it.
Okay, I know that being a trauma center actually affects how many helicopters come in And what do you anticipate the amount of helicopters coming in on a weekly basis to be?
You know, I think currently we have, probably 2 helicopters per week coming in. I don't see that changing in the foreseeable future.
Okay, very good. And then I just have a couple of comments which are in response to some of the written comments that we got in, which were about Mr. Thompson, or Mr. Thomas, I'm sorry, had suggested raising the solar panels and putting parking underneath. I thought that was very intriguing. And also Mr. Lee Rosner was saying that perhaps Mather would like to think about pilots, payment in lieu of taxes, since they are not a taxable entity, or contributing to the business improvement district. Because as much as Mather gives the community, Port Jeff gives to Mather too, as far as maintenance and roads and all kinds of things. But thank you very much, and I very much appreciate your candidness.
So I will, we can answer on the solar panels. Essentially they can't just be lifted up. These are ground mounted solar panels. They would actually have to be completely removed, and it would have to be a completely new solar facility designed. There's parking issues. If you've ever been to the county court system and you've parked and there's snow, and then the snow hits your car. So
Yes.
Those solar panels, if we did do parking there, we would be taking away some green energy, and that's not the intention of this project.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, before we go to Laura, Barbara, did you have anything on HVAC noise on the existing building?
Oh, yes. Right now, it's pretty quiet, and I know that in the past, it was chalked up to traffic, but I was looking at the HVAC unit right now. When the temperatures are lower than 50 degrees, they power down because they're really just a heating unit and not the AC. When the temperature rises, the AC powers up, very noisy. And I think what adds to that is the fact that these HVAC units on the Medical Arts building is directly across from Westview, and Westview acts as a channel, or it tunnels in the sound. Because sound, if I'm on Westview and the HVAC is very loud and I walk across the street to Mather's side of Beltaire Road, you can't hear it at all, because sound travels in waves, and the first thing it does is travel across and down and then waves again. So I think the physical presence of Westview Avenue directly across from these HVAC units is channeling the sound down Westview Avenue. I'm hoping that Mather will look into screening them, because there are no screens on it right now. And I was very happy to hear that the HVAC on the new ED building will be screened, because there are residents right on Beltaire Road that will be looking directly at it and hearing it.
Yeah, so as far as the Medical Arts building and the HVAC system, Mather is committed to not only obviously screening, but ensuring that the noise does not mitigate. And the best way for us to do that is to mitigate the sound at the source. And that's what we'll be doing. So Mather has committed by the end of phase one, within this phase one, that we would be fixing that noise issue that exists today.
That would be so wonderful. And from what I understand,
well, now it's on the record, so it'll happen.
Yes, yes. And from the World Health Organization saying noise really can put stress on the body, I can attest to that. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you very much.
It'll be fixed. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Barbara. Those were good questions. Laura?
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you, Barbara. I want to second your questions about construction and how things are going to be handled during construction. So I eagerly await the plans that Courtney, you and your team are going to provide. My question, I have actually two, and the first one is in regards to the helipad. I was a little surprised to hear that the height of a future parking structure will be limited due to the flight plan of the helipad. And I do want it on record that this is exactly why the planning board denied segmenting the application. I don't know how many years ago. We actually specifically said, do not put a helipad in until you come before us with a master plan. So I'm hoping that in the future, if you do need to put in a parking garage, that you can reapproach the FAA, because what is the limit for that parking garage with the helipad, where it is, and the flight plan that you currently have?
You have someone from your team that can answer that?
Yeah, we can. Can you allow Sierra Lepore to come into the presentation?
Sure, just give me a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think it's is it Alex or Sierra? Allow Alex as well.
All right, I don't see Sierra, but let me see.
Sorry, it's Alex. My bad.
Alex DeYoung.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, Alex.
There's also a Lubikovsky in the waiting room.
No, we don't like him. No, no.
Never mind.
Yeah, so Alex, while she comes in, Alex is a part of VHB. We are going to have to swear her in as a panelist, just so for matters of public hearing. She is part of VHB. She's going to be pulling up the plans. As we pull up the plans, she's going to show you the fact of, again, we do have the direction, and worked very hard with the village on where the helicopters could enter. You know, right now there was the potential in past applications that the helicopters would come over the residences. So we've worked very hard and listened to the village and to ensure that they now came from this direction. So she is going to be pulling up and getting back to us in 1 second. Is there another question I can answer while she's getting entered into here, Laura?
No, my next question has to do with drainage, and I was actually going to see if I think Gil might be the better one to discuss the drainage, but you know, the planning board was not involved in any of those discussions. And like I said, we did specifically say not to do that because of this exact problem, right? So we've designed yourselves kind of into a box here for a future parking garage or parking structure.
And we have, again, we're pulling up the plans now. So Alex, if you could unmute yourself and we can get her sworn in.
Oh, sorry guys, I'm having trouble connecting to my server. So I'm having an issue pulling up the plan real quick. I wish I could I want to show you the flight path and the grade changes. Oh, should I be sworn in?
So why don't we do this? If you guys don't mind, we're gonna give Alex and Andrew Kelly a minute to kind of coordinate on pulling up that plan. So she's having trouble connecting to the server. And if you don't mind, maybe we could switch to the drainage question.
That's fine.
Okay, yeah, so then I cede that to Gil because that's his expertise for sure.
To be frank, right now, I don't really have any questions. I want to review the report that was provided by RMS to look at, the differences. We've spoken about it in the past meetings. And I know that, the hospital is committed to working with the village to make the improvements that are needed. I'm just really interested in seeing the extent of the village drainage that's connected in, the extent of or the limits that your new drainage will provide
Yep.
additional drainage. So I'm going to defer this, at least for this meeting,
Okay.
until I get a chance to review.
Yeah, because
Right,
Gil,
and-
it seems like Courtney has a significantly different number than RMS. I
So
mean, it's a big
RMS
difference.
Okay.
Yeah, so RMS, remember, they have not provided yet. They say right in the letter that it's a draft of what they think goes in from the village system. They gave a square footage, which is that, that's 6 acres, give or take, and that 50,000 cubic feet. So, so they have not finished. I think, again, we just got that 2 days ago.
Okay.
So it's probably worth,
So I guess, Courtney, the thing that I'm very worried about is that you're saying that your drainage area E is only short 50,000 cubic feet, and RMS has a significantly higher number, even without considering the additional roadways.
so I can answer that question.
Okay.
So they purely did it off of storage, right? So there's a difference between storage. The village requirement storage is a 3-inch rainfall, okay? And so everywhere that we show improvements, we show the village's 3-inch rainfall. The SWIP requirements, with this New York State DEC requirement, the village is a MS4. And so you guys review those SWIPs. And again, we haven't finalized the SWIP because we were still working on all the drainage. But that is a 100-year storm, which is closer to a 9-inch range.
I'm actually only discussing the 3-inch rainfall.
Okay.
There, the RMS or the R and M are saying that the additional storage that you need is 120,908 cubic feet. And that is assuming that Port Jefferson is contributing, let's just round up, 51,000 cubic feet. So we definitely, and this is not my area of expertise, definitely needs a lot more delving into this. Right. And then that whole drainage area actually needs to be maintained consistently and not allowed to become considered, what was it considered at this point by the state? Because it's been not maintained for so long, they actually thought it was a natural waterway or water.
A wetland.
Wetland.
Or freshwater pond.
Right.
So, so I think you're looking at the National Wetland Inventory Map. The National Wetland Inventory Map is not a regulatory map. If you check the New York State DEC wetland map, it is not a regulated wetland.
No, and I understand. I guess I'm just highlighting the point that it needs to be, if we're going to include this, like we should, as part of your drainage, it actually needs to be maintained going forward. And
that
not,
is understood.
yes, okay.
A complete agreement, yes.
Okay.
All right, so now if we could swear in Alex.
Yep. Lorraine, if you could swear in Alex.
I don't see her.
Oh, I'm here.
She's maybe in the second set of, if you scroll down on the right-hand side, you'll see her. She's right below you on my screen, but I don't know if that's true. You've got arrows on the right hand. Can we go back to full screen? Might be easier.
all right. Let me see. Okay, good.
No,
All right, Alex. Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, great.
So now,
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I would love to address that comment about the max height of the potential parking garage. So on this plan, you can see the proposed flight path, and it is permitted by the FAA. They have no objection to this, and we worked with them on this plan, like Courtney mentioned earlier. In this plan, it shows the 8-to-1 ascent and descent pattern of a helicopter that will be, that will be used to land and depart from this area. So with these contours that are shown here on this plan, they show the elevation changes that are required. So, and cannot be exceeded. So in this particular situation, it's about 17 feet above existing grade out there at the edge of the parking lot that would start to encroach on the helicopter path that we have currently permitted. Now, I want to mention that in our discussions with FAA, we looked at alternative flight paths also. Typically, they prefer to permit 2 flight paths, an ingress and an egress. And although it's not required, like what we're showing, we preferred to show 1 flight path that serves as both the ingress and the egress in order to eliminate noise concerns for the neighbors and to really hone in on the areas that we want the pilots to be using. However, there is another path that we could potentially move forward on in the future if the parking deck were to exceed the approach and departure surface and we needed to relocate the flight path without relocating the helipad itself.
Okay, so you've considered that in the future, or that you might need that, and the other direction will not go over that, because there are neighbors that are going to be affected by this flight path just like any other. So
Sure.
okay, so as long as you have an alternate and that you could go beyond, because if I'm understanding it's 17 feet from that, what I'm going to consider the upper lot or the northern lot.
Yes.
So you could have, now again, I'm not sure, I can't remember the exact grade change, but you might be able to fit 1 deck.
I think that's actually the plan, and I think Courtney can speak to that. But
other than that, that is the limit at this point.
Yes.
So
Okay.
it would be 17.5 feet taller than that upper parking lot. So you're talking somewhere between, instead of a parking deck being 2 decks, you're talking maybe 1 more deck. It would be limited to, and that's the placement of the helipad. We have only in our master plan proposed a 2-deck story, two stories.
Okay.
Which is below the current flight path and would not require us to go back to the FAA and reconfigure the.
But it's possible. I mean, I just want to make sure we haven't designed into a corner, because there really isn't any other location for parking. Right.
Right. And I want to mention, we worked really closely with the village on this helipad and the design of it, and making sure that we, meet all of the village criteria. And
I hear you. Unfortunately, the planning board was not part of that discussion. And we specifically said no to this because we wanted to see a master plan and consider all of these issues before that location. But Mather went ahead and did it. And so now I just want to make sure that there's possibilities for flexibility in the future. So thank you.
May I ask where that alternate flight plan will be? Did you say it was
we don't have where that alternate was, but it was essentially over the residences to the north or into the east.
Yep. Almost due east.
Okay,
Yeah.
I do have a question though. Ironically, yesterday, a helicopter came in and it circled on the west around the houses on Westview Avenue. It just circled around. I could see it from my yard. And then it approached the heliport from the west. So are these flight plans, are the guides, or must the pilots? I know this flight plan, I don't know if this flight plan is in effect now. But this helicopter pilot chose to circle the houses on the west side of Beltaire Road. Is that an individual's decision and they'll override the flight plan? Or once the new heliport is there and the flight plan is in place, must they follow that?
So great question. The flight paths that are permitted through the FAA are put into a system, and all of the pilots that are in the area and use the local ID of this helipad that's registered with the FAA would know the actual degree of ingress and egress to land here. Now, that being said, every pilot is at their discretion to approach and land in a safe manner. So if the winds that day are going toward or with the helipad, and the helicopters like to fly into the wind, that's how they gain control, and that's how they land. So if the winds are very strong and going, in the direction that is not going to be a safe landing for them, it is at their discretion to come in at a safe landing pattern, however that may be. Now they have to communicate with the airspace and let them know which route they're going to take and where they'll be landing and when. But ultimately, the goal is to have a safe landing, and if the desired path or the permitted path is not that for that day and that time, it really is up to them.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that.
Just one quick question on this subject before we leave it. I know with airplanes, you usually have a crosswinds, so you'll have a 90-degree secondary route. With helicopters, they don't do that. They just have a single route coming in. Or, I understand the pilot's going to choose the safest route to land.
Yep.
But there's only one for helicopters. It's my question.
So you can definitely have a secondary path of ingress and egress, and a lot of times that is a part of the permit. However, for private helipads, just one permitted path is required. So what would happen is the helicopter would come in at this direct angle, land on the helipad, and then when they would be ready to leave, they would actually elevate themselves, hover over the helipad, turn in 180 degrees, and then fly out that same direction, as long as all of the conditions are right.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I should point out too, we talked about the drainage comments from R&M. They were just received 2 days ago. So there's a good piece of information to go through. So it will take some time to go through and resolve and really delve into the details on this. But that will be done both by planning staff and planning board will also look at this as well. Any other board members have any comments at this point? Okay, I'd like to bring in Jen Siegler from the planning department. Jen, if you'd like to kind of summarize some of the comments you've had to date and where we are, give us an update on status, that would be great.
Okay, where we are. It seems to me so far that the overwhelming majority of the comments pertained to the proposed clearing. And I think the applicant's done a very good job of clarifying the difference between landscaping, natural vegetation, undisturbed land, and I hope that that clarity has come across to the public. As everyone has mentioned, I believe that there are two important impacts that need more resolution. drainage being one. And I think we're well on the way to establishing parameters to look at, and now have a number of engineers on board representing different entities, which I think will be very helpful. In terms of my comments regarding resubmissions by the applicant, they tend to be a little more detailed, and I plan to summarize those in a staff report to the planning board for next week's work session. And obviously they can certainly be discussed at the next scheduled or the continuation of this public hearing. But I think all in all, I think the applicant has been quite responsive to the planning board's concerns. And I think we're in a good place to keep moving forward. That's about all I have right now.
Thanks, Jen. And Jen was referring to the regular working session we have next Thursday, March 10th, which is viewable, but there's no public comment taken at that work session because it's not a public hearing. So at this point, the next step is to hear from the public. And I'd just like to start out by, I guess, Lisa, if you can be host again.
Okay.
I want to talk a little bit, first of all, about public comment that was received to date. A week ago, we compiled a chart that summarizes all the people who commented up to that point. And again, if you tuned in early for the work session tonight, before the public hearing, we talked about additional comments that have come in before tonight's meeting. I guess the published notice and other things stimulated some more comments. All comments will be considered by the board and referred to the applicant for responses. All comments will be treated equally. And any comment that we received in the last few days will again be part of the public record. In addition, we're going to keep the comment period open after tonight. We'll talk about that a little further before the end of this meeting. But I'd like to first go through, I think this is relatively, could you zoom in on that a little bit just to fill up the screen in case people are watching on a small screen. And again, this is a chronological table, just shows in the left-hand column the date the comment was received. Pretty much they go back from February 24th and go backwards to December 27th, comments that were received. Name of the person who made the comment, whether or not they were a village resident, and that's just determined from, these are primarily email comments. So a lot of people indicated they were village residents. Others didn't say whether they weren't or whether they were or not. A lot of them probably are. And then the right portion of the table summarizes the comments that were received in terms of categorizing them into certain categories. I will say that we talked about the ARC comments, and as Anthony mentioned, they were very complimentary for the information that they got to review, and complimentary of the architectural schemes chosen for the project. So those will be entered into the record. Again, I like to commend the ARC for a very extensive and thorough and prompt set of comments that committee has been providing on projects. Once again, they've done it on this project. Very thoughtful comments that will be addressed by the applicant and also with the consideration of the village planning department and planning board. So again, I'm going to go through and read these names. The stenographer is going to get a copy of this, so they'll be able to, mention that these people commented. In the left-hand column, I'll read your name down, and I apologize if I pronounce it incorrectly. Some of these names are challenging for me. And I will say that we're going to open it up to public comment. If your name is on here and we have your comments, and likewise for anybody who's submitted comments between February 24th and today, which as of, I think, late this afternoon, Cindy Suarez, who collects all the comments and responds to emails that she received them, has done a great job collating them and organizing them. Of course, it was too late to include them on this comment form. But this gives you an idea of who's commented. And when we go to the public comment session, which will follow, anybody who would like to make a comment on Zoom, I'll go over again how you do that before we actually do it. There's no need really for anybody on this chart to log in, because we will consider your comment. If you'd like to just log in and just quickly say, hey, I commented, you're right, I did comment on a couple of things, like the clearing around the site, the reduction in the clearing. Thanks for considering my comments, or whatever you'd like to say. Seeing that there are, I think we've got 42 people in the waiting room, so to speak, who are either just watching and not commenting or going to comment. I'm going to assume that, we'll have a substantial number. If say half the number of people comment, will be here for an hour listening to comments. No real problem with that, but I'd like to limit the comments to 3 minutes. When I say 3 minutes, I'll be keeping track on a sophisticated electronic device, which is my phone, the 3-minute time period. And you might think 3 minutes is a short period of time, but you can actually say a lot in 3 minutes. And we'll let you know if you get to the point where you need to wrap it up, because we'd like to keep moving. We don't want to be here till midnight handling comments, but that's not to say that every comment is important and will be considered. So let me just read down the names. So going backwards from, I guess the first one's out of order, but generally going backwards from February 24th to December 27th of last year. So far, I'll just read the names, and then we'll talk about the comments, how they're categorized, and what's the prevalent comment that's being made, or class or subject of comments. So we've had Jane Golub, Anna, and this is going to be a tough one for me, Anna Hosianova, Cecile Mizuko, Dunia Kersey, Matt Cunningham, Lee Rosner. I will mention that Lee has already been mentioned by, I think it was Barbara, right? That he made the comment that the village should request a pilot or a payment in lieu of taxes for increased village services that are being required by the increased development and the increased activity and other things on the site. So I won't go into more detail than that on Lee's comment. Carol Gavin, Jessica Gurevich, Todd Postal, Matt Eisenman, Heather Lynch, Andrew Thomas, Brian Smith, Janella Damascos, John Damascos, Robert Biaggi, Eric Sprons, Ashley Love, Susan Sears. We had comments from Haydick Engineering. I'll talk about those in a moment. Kelly Devine, the Village of Port Jeffs CAC, Citizens Advisory Committee, or Conservation. That's the Conservation Advisory Committee. Sorry, has sent in a set of written comments, and those will be looked into or assessed. Amal and Wally Carzay and Allegra De Laurentiis, I guess that is. So these are all the people who have commented to date. Second column, as I mentioned, whether or not we can determine from your comments whether or not you're a village resident. Of course, it's more pertinent if you are a village resident, but that's not to say others in the area can't comment. So we've divided the comments into categories. And as you can see from the X's, if you go down the left-hand column, reducing the clearing limit was a very prevalent comment. Basically, everyone made the comment, with the exception of Lee Rosner and Haydick Engineering, which is a consultant for Suffolk OBGYN, which is, I believe, across the street at 118 North Country Road. So the categories of reduced clearing, keeping the walking trail, and constructing the parking garage are somewhat related because, you know, a lot of people were upset about the clearing limit, wanted to keep the walking trail, and said, hey, instead of, a lot of this was tied into, you're clearing more property, why don't you just construct a parking garage? You'd have to clear less property to build the village or to build the required parking spaces. So those three are related. And you can see, as I said, the reduced clearing was a primary comment. Another subject that was commented on was noise, and that could have been from increased helicopter activity at the site, or due to the proposed building expansion, and also from parking. And in general, I think that was, a lot of those comments were from neighbors on the north side who were concerned about additional noise being able to hear from their homes due to the additional parking activity, or the parking being closer to the north end of the property. I don't know that that's actually the case. I think the parking's probably in the same spot pretty much. In fact, I think there was a row along the north side that's being removed. But certainly the emergency room's a little closer, and the helicopter, the concern for the helicopters was increased activity. Not a lot of comments on increased traffic at the site. And I will say another thorough analysis was the traffic analysis done by VHB in conjunction with comments from the village, both the planning department and the planning board. And I think that's been very thoroughly assessed, what the traffic impact and what the traffic mitigation should be at the site. And then we had some comments on increased light pollution from the buildings at the site. I know the illumination in the parking field are cut-off light fixtures, which Courtney explained prevent light from being transmitted off the site onto properties adjacent to the site. So that's a positive. And then we did have the comment about offsite flooding, and that, again, that was from Suffolk GYN through Haydick Engineering, hired by Suffolk OBGYN, and that comment referred to flooding at their site due to overflowing from the existing recharge basin on the site. Again, we have drainage comments from R&M, which we'll be going through, and we will get to the bottom of the drainage and make sure that that's improved collectively. So that kind of summarizes what I wanted to say. And again, I'm going to go through the basically the procedure we always follow at public meetings when we solicit public comment. First of all, because we're virtual now, anybody in Zoom who would like to make a public comment should raise their hand. The people will be admitted by one by one. When you're admitted, we'd like you to state your name and address. You'll be sworn in by the stenographer. Again, it's going to be a 3-minute time limit. And it's important when you enter and you make your comments that you address the board. So there will be no dialogue between somebody making a comment and directly with the applicant, like, hey, you said, and we want to keep it professional, or, we don't want to have it. I know some of this is emotional for people. We want to make very upset about something, but we want to keep it professional and, professionally, we'll have a good decorum. So we don't have any, we don't need to step in and say, hey, you just turn down your mood a little bit. So again, please address the board. If you have a question, we will relay it to the appropriate person on the VHB team or the attorney that's representing the team or the hospital representatives. So I think that basically covers anything with the procedure we'd like to follow. Again, I've said this a couple of times now. If you're on YouTube and you'd like to make a comment, please switch over to Zoom. Again, the address, the link or the link that you follow to get on Zoom is on the village website along with the YouTube link. You won't be able to comment on YouTube. So that being said, I see Allison popped on, so she probably told me that I missed something, which is fine because I asked her to do that. So let's see. How's that procedure so far?
Just two quick comments. The chairman mentioned that there's going to be a time limit for your comments. If you feel that you are not able to address your comments within that time limit, please know that the board is intending to keep this matter open so that additional comment can come in. Please feel free to conclude your comments in writing, and those comments can be sent to Cindy Suarez at the Building and Planning Department. The other thing that we mentioned earlier in the meeting, and part of the reason we have the 3-minute limit in place, is if you hear comments that you agree with and you want to make sure that the board knows that you agree with them, don't feel the need to repeat all of the comments throughout. Feel free to just pop on after raising your hand and being let into the meeting and expressing that you agree with such and such comments on 3 issues. The board takes each and every one of your comments quite seriously, and we fully expect the applicant and their representatives to answer any questions or address any of these concerns when it is their turn. Mr. Chairman, I would also suggest, rather than going back and forth between the applicant and the public, that I'm certain that the applicant's team will be taking diligent notes as the comments come through. And after all public comment has concluded, I would suggest then that the board grants the applicant's representatives the opportunity to respond.
Yeah, that works better, especially if we have a lot of comments. So again, I guess now's the time. If you'd like to make a comment, make sure you're on Zoom, put your hand up. Please do not use the chat feature because we can't keep our eyes both on the hands that are raised and the comments that are being made by people and the chat as well. So that being said, Lisa, I guess you can enter.
I will bring up the first panelist, Dunaya Karzai, here to make her comments.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, we'll just ask you to give your name and address. The stenographer will swear you in.
Sounds good. So yes, my name is Dunya Karzai, and I'm a resident at 318 East Broadway in Port Jefferson.
I think you're muted.
No, I hear her.
I hear.
I didn't get that. What was your address again?
318 East Broadway.
East Broadway, okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Karzai?
Karzai, yes.
Would you raise your right hand, please?
Oh, sure.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Denai, before you start, Lorraine, her name's on the list.
I got it.
At the beginning. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, you can go.
Okay, so I had a few questions, but in the interest of bringing up ones I think not many people will be bringing up, my main question is, has any form of sustainability feasibility study been done for the construction stages themselves? So for instance, a lead feasibility study, anything to kind of minimize erosion, sedimentation problems that would arise, especially if we don't have a definite date for certain phases.
Okay. All right. As Allison suggested, we're going to take all the comments down and the applicant will address them all if they choose to address them tonight or respond to them tonight. They are being recorded, okay, so that will be entered and they will be addressed. But if they choose at the end to, we may get similar comments together. They can address them all at once. It makes the process go quicker.
Sounds
But
good.
thank you for your comment. And
Is it all right if I think I have a couple more or a minute left? Is it okay if I list a couple?
Oh, I'm
others in
sorry.
that case?
I thought that you were finished. Go ahead.
No. So the couple others are regarding the drainage and drainage reserve plans, which I saw in that blue beam, which was brought up for us. It seemed as if nothing was accounting for the quality of the water that's infiltrating back into the groundwater system itself. So yes, and we might be allowing through gradation or whatever other means are being used for water to re-enter, but the quality of the water will naturally go down if there is no vegetative buffer to actually filter out pollutants, not just during the construction phase, but once everything is completed. It is a parking lot, so there's a lot of debris that will naturally accrue over time. And then the last kind of quick point I wanted to bring up was that, and I put this in the chat, I realized we're not really using that, simply that it seems as if prevailing winds and the fact that a lot of it is up to the discretion of the pilot when we're talking about the helicopter pad is not being accounted for, the path itself is a bit of a moot point. So a possible option, which I didn't see, would be that instead of going for horizontal development, vertical development of the parking lot could be used instead, and then the helipad could go simply on top of that parking lot structure without changing by any significant degree the angle proposed. And also obviously reducing the need to cut down a section of vegetated land. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Lisa will be admitting the next person.
Sure. Okay, just 1 second here. I got to go between multiple screens. Lou Bukowski is joining us as a panelist.
As a panelist, or?
He's joining us to make comment.
Oh, okay.
If is it working?
He.
No, I'm not. Oh, okay. His hand was raised.
I saw him disappear from the list.
Okay.
Unless he just this. No, I'm sorry. His order just switched. His hand went down.
Okay, that's fine. I was wondering if it was by mistake. I have brought in Amal Karzai.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Two comments. One
Okay,
kind of.
Before you do that, Lorraine said
Oh,
she-
sorry. Yes, my name is Mel.
First of all, could you, I got that. Your address, please?
318 East Broadway, Port Jefferson Village.
Are you saying 38 like B or?
318
318
East Broadway.
East Broadway. Okay. Could you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's a question. So anyway, it's kind of trailing what Dunya Karzai mentioned about drainage. It has something to do with that. So what Courtney was describing was she gave us numbers and that they would be short by about 50,000 cubic feet. I think that was correct. But what it seemed to me wasn't taken account because they mentioned current drainage and that it isn't being maintained. But what about the natural drainage? So we don't actually know, or at least I haven't heard or don't well understand what the proposed artificial drainage is in comparison to new drainage plus whatever the vegetation is already doing for us. And and kind of following that way, you know, landscaping is mentioned continually, and it can be really nice. It's great if there's nothing there, you want landscaping. But you know, landscaping, it's not the same as our current ecosystem, and whether it's indigenous or not, it's still that area is still a contained ecosystem. And what many of us are trying to do is maintain it by not cutting. By not destroying the vegetation currently there. I mentioned, I think in my letter, you know, we have a deer issue. If you start cutting trees, there's only one place for those deer to go, and that is back to our gardens. Then we get more and more tick-borne diseases, and we become your patients. And that's just happening back and forth. I've been here for 21 years, and this has been happening continually. I'm not a single instance. It's a whole village worth of people like this. But again, whether or not you consider the current ecosystem indigenous, it is self-contained. And what was the other point? We did so much. Yeah. So ultimately, where the current parking is, I think this is what Courtney was saying, because we were looking at a map that she pulled up. She overlaid her map on something from 1964. It would have been nice to see it on, you know, we just pulled, Dunya and I pulled something from Google Earth so we could see what she proposed on top of 2022, because 1964 was a bit weird. Again, it didn't matter if the vegetation was indigenous or not. It is still performing a function. And rather than cutting it down and create artificial drainage, why not use what we already have? Much less polluting. But I had one more point. Sorry, I've probably gone over 3 minutes. No, I'm going to stop there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. I will bring in the next commenter, Jessica Gorovich.
Jessica's also on the list, Lorraine.
I have it.
Okay.
G-U-R-E.
Yes, hello, I'm Jessica Gurevich. Can you hear me?
Yes, Jessica, we can hear you. Could you please state your address?
My address is 702 Brewster Drive.
Could you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thanks. You can start.
Thank you. So just to introduce myself, I am a distinguished professor of ecology at Stony Brook University. My specialty is plant ecology, and I have published the major international textbook on plant ecology. I felt that I have a comment and some questions. I felt that the description of the disturbance and the native vegetation was inaccurate as a PhD ecologist. The vegetation around Mather and around this entire area is high diversity forest vegetation that is on what is called the Harbor Hills moraine. It's some of the highest diversity forested area on Long Island, actually, at least in this part of Long Island. If you go far enough west, there are some remnants that are higher diversity because of the soils. I won't go into all those details. The entire northeastern US has reforested undisturbed land. The entire northeastern US was all cut from the original forests for fields. So the fact that there were fields here originally that have undergone secondary succession to recreate native forests is nothing exceptional about that. They're still native forests. So my question is, the presentation was really hard for me to follow. I gather that they're proposing to build a new building and some additional parking, that major entrance is going to be now on Beltaire Road, which it's not now. The major entrance now to the hospital is on North Country Road. But that was all very, very unclear. There was a blizzard of detail and very little overview from my perspective, but I haven't been attending all of these meetings, so I haven't been following the development of this proposal. The question I have is how much forest is proposed to be cut? How much of the new development of paved areas, including the new buildings and the new parking lots, how much of that is on existing pavement and how much of the forested area is to be cut? There's no equivalence between landscaped areas and native forest. We have a large tract of non-fragmented forest there now that goes over into the east side of the, east of the property that Mather owns. And the more you nibble away at the edges and fragment and cut that forest, the dramatic, the more dramatically you lower the ecological value of that intact area. So those are my comments. And I wanted to also second or agree with the comment that was made by Ms. Karzai earlier, that the runoff from parking lots is not the same thing as runoff from vegetated areas, because there's a lot of oil and pollutants and toxins that run off that are picked up in the water. Yeah, my cat agrees with me. That are picked up in the water that's running off. And the final comment is, if we're predicting runoff from the existing rainfall, all the predictions and current research is showing that the amount of intense periods of very heavy rainfall are increasing due to climate change, and that greatly increases runoff. So to say we have such and such amount of runoff now, if you're increasing the amount of paved area and then climate change is leading to periods of very intense rainfall, then you're underestimating the amount of runoff that you're going to have, and that has to be caught quickly in catchments because of the speed at which it's falling. So those are my comments. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thanks. I have a feeling you may get some responses at the end, but stay tuned.
I'll try. I've been on for 2.5 hours now, and oh my goodness, that's a long night to ask for.
Thanks. Okay.
All right.
Next.
I will bring in the next person. Laura Abdul. All right, for some reason I had trouble promoting Laura Abdul to panelist. I'll try again in a minute. In the meantime, I have promoted some Gerardo, I can't see his full name right now, to panelist.
Okay, he's in on the
Gerardo San Roman.
right.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'll try to keep my comments brief.
Dr. San Rama, would you please state your address?
118 North Country Road.
I assume that's in Port Jeff.
Yes,
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
So I appreciate the opportunity to comment, and I appreciate the work of the committee and in doing their due diligence. I'm a practicing physician, a member of Suffolk OBGYN. We've been in the community for many, many, many years. I've taken care of many patients, delivered many of your kids. And my main concern is the problem that we had with flooding caused by a rainstorm back in September. And I'm really very happy to hear that this is being addressed, that the planning board has gotten engineers involved. You've heard from an engineer that we hired to help us navigate through this. And I just wanted to drive home the impact of this to our business. If I'm allowed to share my screen for a second.
You can.
Can you see this?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So on the night of September 1st, when Storm Ida came into town, this was the scene next to our property on 110 North Country Road. This is drainage coming down the street from North Country Road, going down my neighbor's driveway and ending up, as you could see in a second, in our backyard.
Yes.
So we have a 2-story building. The lower level took on 5 feet of water and caused approximately $1 million in financial damage between rebuilding and loss of income. We've had to relocate our practice to Center Reach. And just wanted to drive home a little personal glimpse of the impact and to urge the planning board to do everything in their power to try to prevent this from happening again.
Well, I can't speak for the entire board, but I think this is, thank you for sharing it. It's, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. This video is probably worth a lot more than that. And it really, makes a very good record of exactly what happened and what you went through. So thank you for providing that.
And if the chairman would allow Eric Jeter, our architect, to make any comments following mine, that may create some continuity to my comments.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I'm promoting Eric Jeter to panelist.
Good evening or good morning, depending where we are.
Good evening, Mr. Jeter. Could you please state your address?
26 Hickory Road, Bayville.
And could you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good evening, board. I'd like to ask to share my screen. I know we're limited on time and I have a lot to say, especially after the moving testimony, honestly, that Dr. San Roman just recently gave. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. So of course I have many. Let me try to find how it's going to share. Apologize. There we are. Okay, so I'll try to keep it brief. There's so many issues, and just to present myself, I'm a professional engineer, work for Hayduck Engineering. I specialize in stormwater. The previous presenter and his colleagues asked us to take a look at the drainage basin, what the issue is, try to identify what's really going on. And, you know, this is obviously before having to deal with any expansion of the hospital and the parking. And so what we found is the Mathers property, I believe they call it out as 38.77 acres. It's roughly 65% of the entire drainage basin that drains down to my client's property. Of the Mathers, of the entire basin, you have about 58.8 acres. And what really hasn't been accounted for on this project is the upstream run-on, as we call it. So this is the area where when rainfall collects, it goes down gradient towards the property and onto the Mathers property. It's a very significant area. While there are some dry wells within the developed area at the top of the hill, most certainly is not accounting for the 100-year storm as was previously presented. The site design obviously it's not accounting for 100% or 100-year 24-hour storm duration. I think that was misrepresented during the presentation. They are accounting for the 3-inch. They are doing the minimum required by the village code, which, as we know in Port Jefferson, the village code is not stopping flooding in Port Jefferson in any way, shape, or form. We do have this area that I just briefly mentioned that may or may not be running onto a residential neighborhood down below. Hopefully they're not having any issues, but this area is actually going outside of our drainage area. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit, very slowly here, because my computer's freezing. So what we calculated for North Country Road, the contributing area that's ultimately draining to that Mather infiltration pond is about 3.2 acres. So there's 3.2 acres of right-of-way that directly impacts the capacity of the pond. There's other areas like the DPW property and other properties south of North Country Road that also contribute to the pond. But I'd like to point out that over 2.8 acres of the Mathers property actually drains directly into the road without hitting a catch basin and going to that pond. So when you consider that essentially Mathers is matching the public right of way 1-to-1 in terms of the contribution to the flooding, I feel it's unfair to blame the village for any of the flooding. They're contributing, and obviously there was an issue, and that's why they piped stormwater to the pond in the first place. But in fact, North Country Road is receiving water from Mather. And I saw that there were some proposed, maybe some proposed driveway upgrades. I'm drawing a blank. What was the name of the road, the driveway to the south? It's like Bellhorn or something.
Bellhorn.
Oh, okay. Hey, that's a good guess. So that entire area isn't being picked up by Mather, and it's not proposed to be picked up on the plans. My client wants that area picked up, taken back on site, or which would probably be mutually beneficial. And I know I'm going over my time, but if there was a, perhaps, well, it's very important information, and I wish we could break it up more. But if there was a bioswale or a retention pond that's placed on the north side of North Country Road, I think it could benefit both the village and Mathers, be a low cost solution along the north side of the road, and it would help everybody take care of this issue. We're asking, and this is the last 20 seconds, we're asking that these upgrades, the maintenance to the pond, which hasn't been maintained for over 30 years, the expansion of the pond, which is an absolute necessity, be part of the conditions of the approval to this project, and they must be put onto these plans, and they cannot be kicked down the road as a promise or something that might be done in the future. It must be properly calculated, engineered, and put on these plans so that our client never has to deal with 5 feet of standing water, which many people potentially can drown in, as a result of the negligence on this property. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your comments. And you can be assured that when we talk about a condition of approval, that it'll be well defined based on resolution of the drainage issue, because there are a lot of things to look at and a lot of documents to review. So the planning department will be doing that and advising the board of the same.
Yeah, and the village engineer that's recently been retained, they've got to back check this to ensure that the downstream flood hazard is being mitigated, because this is a great project. I mean, this is personal and professional. It's a great project that's being presented. I think it was Jessica and I'm sorry, her last name was Karzai, but they had a great point about water quality. These are the things that the village should be promoting. But at the same time, we all know it's a hospital. Everybody's going to want to use it, whether we want it or not. I mean, this is the best use for any land use, but just the responsible thing is to take care of the downstream and understand that with this expansion of a vital necessity, we also need to do it ecologically sound, and we need to do it in everybody's best interest. So thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you. Okay.
I'll change. All right, I will bring in the next applicant, next panelist. Let me try it. I'm trying again to promote Laura Abdul. For some reason, I'm having trouble promoting her to panelist. I don't know why.
All right, we seem to be having some technical difficulties. So if Laura can hear us, she's got a, let's see, she's got, just made a statement in the chat.
Just said sorry.
Can Laura, hopefully you can have your comments in writing?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So she said that Dr. Dan Roman has addressed her concerns. Okay. Excellent.
Oh, okay. Fine. Okay. Good.
And I think Andrew Thomas would also like to speak, so I will promote him to panelist.
Hello.
Hi.
Are you hearing me?
How are you?
I'm ready to swear in.
Mr. Thomas, would you state your address, please?
1037 Main Street.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. All right. Thank you for bringing me on. I thank you for hearing all of this copious comment, and to the applicant for an application with quite a lot of work, the vast majority of which I support. I do want to speak out against what I see as the unnecessary clearing of mature woods. But I also want to, before we get started, state for the record, I'm also a member of the ZBA and the ARC, which, as was previously stated in over the course of this hearing, has seen aspects of this application. And I wanted to speak about that briefly, but be super clear that I am speaking for myself, not for the ZBA or for any other member of the ZBA, and likewise for the ARC. Just to set the record straight on a little bit on the ARC, we did speak hugely in favor of the building and the architecture. We did mention that we were opposed to the clearing of woodland just for parking lot. And Mr. Guardino did, he spoke about the sort of deference that's given to healthcare, and we agree largely as well. I think everybody respects Mather as a local institution, but the notion that the woods is being cut down in order for parking and not for this part of the new hospital. I understand that the one comes with the other, but I think that there can be sort of more creative looking at ways to make this compromise work. In other words, I think we need to be able to promote human health and environmental health simultaneously. We have to be able to find a way to have both. So speaking a little bit about the ZBA, again, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but just to set the record straight, I think Mr. Guardino said that it was a unanimous vote. It was not a unanimous vote. I actually objected. So it was 3-1. And in fact, it was one of the more contentious deliberations that I've experienced, that we were deadlocked for quite some time. So, and just a couple more points about that. When the problem was presented to us, it was explained the history that the applicant had come to you with what they believed was 65% clearing. It had been clarified that portions of it were not considered natural vegetation, and so that they were in fact, their proposal was at 75. And so in order to proceed with the conversation with the planning department, it was explained to us that they needed that variance to continue the conversation. In other words, it was couched that the ZBA was giving the variance in order for the planning board to express its discretion. And so personally, I don't want to speak for why anybody else voted, but that was raised by many other members. And I would like to personally encourage the planning board to exercise its discretion and to use the property in the most responsible way. And I think that it has been expressed as a dichotomy between a very expensive parking garage or cutting down some woods. But I don't think, I think there are other creative ways to work the problem. I have proposed some of those, I've submitted them. You mentioned that drawing earlier. There's both the notion of raising the solar panels. I understand that brings cost. But it can be done. It's done quite a lot of the time, snow on a car notwithstanding. It was just done in a large array in Patchogue, and that could be a great solution and maybe should have been considered when they were put in, but it's less expensive than a parking deck. One of the other things that I mentioned in there was the notion that you could put a taller retaining wall. In other words, that area where you have that parking structure that is proposed for phase 4 should it be needed. The structure itself, in other words, parking on the upper deck would be very expensive, but simply replacing those two shorter retaining walls with one larger retaining wall would double the amount of parking that's happening on that footprint now on that lower level. You'd essentially be building the lower level of the parking garage now. And if you put those two together and do some rejiggering of it, you get very close to the parking that they're showing in the scheme without demolishing most of that wood. So that's what I submitted. Now, I'm not a professional. I haven't engaged in parking and in these range. I am a design professional, but I understand that people have engaged with these answers a lot more. My plans are not authoritative. I'm merely submitting them as other creative ways to start thinking about the problem that don't involve building a $10 million parking garage or chopping down a bunch of woods to pave it. In any case, I think that's the extent of my comments. I want to say, I think there is a lot of goodwill towards Mather. I'm really glad to see that they're doing this project. I just think that we should be able to find a compromise that doesn't require chopping down good woods. It just doesn't feel like in this day and age that that is the correct vision for how to treat our land, particularly woods that is contiguous with quite a lot of it. You know, if every property chopped down 10% more than it was supposed to, that would be an environmental apocalypse on Long Island. And so we just have to think about in 100 years, is the entire island going to look like Queens with no functional habitat? And, you know, I hope that they do this project. I hope that they come creatively with a different solution to present and that we can thread that needle together. And I look forward to seeing that happen. And I hope that Northwell coming in to take over Mather can see their way to earning the goodwill of the community in this way. So thank you very much.
Okay, all right, thank you. I see we have one more addition in the waiting room with a hand up, John Damascus.
Okay, I've brought in John Damascus, I think. Okay, John, if you unmute and turn on your video, you are part of the meeting now.
Hello. Let's raise my hand and all.
Well, first, could you state your address, please?
601 Scraggy Hill Road.
601
Yes.
Scraggy Hill. And then raise your right hand, please. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Good evening.
Good evening. Well, okay. I saw my name on the list there. I had written an email in, and it said mostly that one of my complaints was mostly about the added noise from the helicopters. That wasn't my only concern. I'd like to know if a projection has been placed in file listing the added traffic that they're projecting. From my understanding, it's an emergency room expansion. My understanding is that they want to capture as much of the business, so to speak, model of the emergency room. How much more helicopter traffic will there be, number one? Prior to Northwell's purchase of Mather, there was almost no helicopter traffic. So I'm wondering, why is there such an increase already, and why are we increasing it more with two other hospitals in the area to accept helicopter transfers? The feasibility to the public of this expansion is a question that I have. I understand why Mather would want to expand their own facility, but why does the public need it? And that is something that I think the board should take up as far as permitting them to expand and encumber the adjacent neighborhoods with added traffic, road traffic and the helicopter traffic. Is the road going to be expanded? Are we using eminent domain or something to expand the road and make it wider so that they can have better access, and so we don't have that half a mile backup when shifts end, which happens now even. So basically, I'm looking to see if they've projected the helicopter increase in regards to the added business that they're trying to create. And then second, I support everything else everybody was saying about the water runoff, but I have no expertise in commenting on that any further.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I see we have, we're gaining people. We have 3 hands up now in the waiting room.
Okay. Bring in Charmaine Folmiero. Charmaine Folmiero, you're in the meeting now. You can unmute.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you. Charmaine, could you please state your address?
I live at
Wait, repeat that, please.
I live at 805 Chambers Court in Port Jefferson.
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am. All right, first I have to start out with, oh my God, we have such a talented, intelligent, educated population here in Port Jeff. Unbelievably impressive. So, and you know, the board, the panel, Laura Zimmerman's comments and Barbara Sabatino's comments, like I am beyond impressed. It really is, you're doing your due diligence and it's very evident. So thank you for that. So I live north of the hospital And I have absolutely no problem with anything that's going to increase the medical attention that someone gets while they're at the hospital. The issue that I have is the environmental concerns of clearing the property, like we've heard many times, when there are other viable options. And I also wanted to address a comment that the attorney from Mather had said at the beginning about the comments from the public looked like they were from a form letter. They were not. Being a part of all of the emails that went around by all the neighbors around here, there were some common threads, 100%, but everything that was spoken by everyone and expressed by everyone is equally important, whether or not they had the same language. And that's really the most of what I have to say.
All right. Thank you, Charmaine.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
All right. I think what we'll do now, we have two people with hands raised. We'll just limit comments to those two people. So we'll close out after the last two get a minute and make their comments.
Okay. So I've just promoted Keith Michael to a panelist. He should be able to unmute and comment.
Keith, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry. All right. You guys can hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Mr. Michael, could you please state your address?
Sure. It's 708 Brewster Drive. I actually just live right behind Charmaine, who just spoke before me. Lovely neighbor.
Okay, and could you raise your right hand, please?
Sure.
You swear that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Okay, so my comment is also about the clearing of the land. Just to give a little unique perspective here. So I live just north of the hospital where they'd be clearing the land. I specifically have already hit 2 different deer because they have nowhere to go. Where they go now is very limited. I have unfortunately have already hit 2 deer in the 6 years that I've been here. The more we clear, the more we push them just towards us. And it can get dangerous. I mean, I'm not talking like I hit them at high speeds or anything, but I mean, you see a lot of close calls. I mean, these deer need some place to go. I don't really think it's a fair thing to say that 30, 40 years ago, the land wasn't developed as much or wasn't, a natural vegetation that was there, because it still was vegetation. You're still replacing vegetation with pavement. That's not conducive to any habitat for any wildlife. The more light pollution you have in that area, the more you move the deer away. You push them more towards us to the north, and we have the elementary school on the other side of us. So we have a lot of deer that hang out there at night because it's nice and dark, and we have the field across the street. You're going to push them onto our property mostly. I already know 2 people. I'm not going to say who, but I know 2 people that live directly in my development that have been bitten by ticks and now have a foodborne allergy that they never had before in their life. I mean, you push them more and more towards us. I don't see that as the best solution when there are other viable ways of developing the land right there that don't include just ripping everything out and putting pavement in. So that's basically just what I wanted to state.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Lisa, if you could admit the last person.
All right, I'm going to be promoting Oral Protopopescu to panelist.
Okay. Oral, if you can hear us, you could turn your camera and mic on.
You've got my husband's picture there, but that's okay. I don't know why. Maybe I can switch it now. I can choose video, can't I? Oh yes. Okay. Then I can speak.
Much
okay.
better.
Yeah. So all right. Orel.
Is your first name Oral? O-R-E-L?
Orel.
Orel. Okay. Could you please state your address?
Yes, 105 Cedar Drive in Miller Place.
Wait,
And-
what was the drive? I didn't get that.
Cedar Drive, 105
Oh, okay. Got
Cedar Drive, Miller Place, at the corner of Pipestave Hollow Road, and one of the last almost completely wooded properties around the harbor.
Okay,
immense-
hold on.
Yeah.
Aurel, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name, so could you
That's
please
okay.
raise your right hand? Raise your
Sure.
right hand.
Sure.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, I just have a few questions because I'm a good friend of the Karzais. And by the way, Dunya didn't tell you, but she's an engineer and she knows what she's talking about. And they informed me of this event, and I sent you a letter, but I think I sent it yesterday. You probably don't have me on the list because I was concerned about the cutting down of the trees. The drainage issue is part of it, but I really, there are many reasons why it's important to keep woodland, whether it's indigenous or later growth. I don't think that's relevant. It's in terms of drainage. Also, I thought the issue about the parking lot and the oil and all the debris of parking lot drainage, the quality of the water, I thought the ecologist, the professor, made a very good point there. My question is, there are two things that I was thinking about listening to all this. One is the purpose of the expansion, because I understand it's an old building and you want to modernize it, but so much of what I heard today sounded cosmetic to me. I didn't really hear a lot about what new medical facilities would be available in the light of this expansion. I know the approach to the old emergency room isn't ideal. I know you want to make that a little more, have more room for people to pull up and everything. It was awkward. That I can see the purpose of that. But I just curious to know whether all this increased space for the hospital is going to mean increased level of care, because there are all these people going to be dropped off via helicopter. That implies trauma center. And yet I heard tonight there will be no trauma center. So are they going to be brought to Mather to be looked at and then helicoptered off to Stony Brook or some other center if they have to be? That wasn't clear to me. And the other question I had to do with was a multi-story garage ever contemplated, or is that just too costly an option? I mean, Dunya did mention having the helicopter raised up and maybe having multi-tier parking, because you talked about only wanting to add 136 spots. And it seems to me that's not huge. I'm sure that under that helicopter pad, you probably have room for at least 136, though I'm not an engineer, I'm a writer, but I just wondered why that was ruled out. Is that just not cost effective at all? Because it seems like you're building out beyond the existing parking lot. Is that correct? You're taking, I mean, the woodland you're going into is, I assume you're building, the expanded building is going out over part of at least the existing parking lot, right? And then,
Yeah.
and then beyond. So those are my questions having to do, did you consider going multi-story or even underground, or even digging down and having underground parking, even under the existing building? I don't know how feasible that is. And then the other question.
Okay. Well, thank you.
About, expanded medical facilities, like what new services you're going to be offering the public at the hospital. And I've lived in Miller Place since 1978, and I've had occasion to bring a lot of people to your emergency room. And it's nice to have a good hospital close by. And I know people who've had very good orthopedic surgery at Mather as well. Hip replacements, knees, I know you do all that stuff. I just wanted to know what else is going on there, or will be going on now with the expansion that you weren't doing before. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for your comments. At this point, we're closing out the public comments session. Anthony, does your team want to make some responses to some of the comments now?
Yes, I think there's some that we can just easily respond to, but I don't think we're in a position to respond to all of them. We want to digest the comments, so that I think that's the plan. I have just a couple of comments I want to make, and then I'll leave it to Courtney to answer whatever she thinks she can answer now, and anything that we need to defer, we'll just address at the next meeting. But I first want to point out that Mr. Thomas was correct, and I apologize. I did not realize that he did vote no on the zoning board, but I will point out, and this is where my mistake, I just read it too quickly. The decision was unanimous with regard to a negative declaration. So he did, in fact, determine that this application would not have a negative impact on the environment. But now I guess he's saying it will. But so there's a little bit of discrepancy. But I do apologize to him because I did misrepresent that, and that's my mistake. I guess the ecologist comments about how much of a forest is being proposed to be cut. I think Courtney said 1.7 acres, but I'll leave that to Courtney to just make sure that that was right. But I thought that was answered. And then finally, I will just point out with respect to Mr. Jeter's comments, and obviously I'm not getting involved with the technical part because that's not my job. But I think it sort of underscores the fact that we need to do some more work here, because he's saying about 3 acres of tributary roadway, and R&M is saying 6. I mean, that's not close, right? They're off by 100% there. So I do think we need to figure that out. And, and again, we want to look at where the water is coming from. We did commit to making these drainage improvements, and the question is going to be, what are those improvements? And I don't think we're in a position to answer that right away. And I think we've said all along that we really need to see, after we put in our drainage in the parking lots and whatnot, to see what's left and to see what we need to put in. And then there was one other one here. No, I guess that's, yeah, I would just make just a generic comment that, there seems to be a concern about runoff from parking lots from, with respect to the quality of water that goes into the recharge basin from our parking lot. But I didn't hear any concern about the runoff from the streets, which, has, the same amount of whatever, runs off onto a paved area from a car or other vehicle. I would think it would be, as much or more from the roadway. So, I just think we all need to look at this and treat, all of the pipes that are going into the recharge basin the same way. And that's a, it's a legitimate point they make. And that's one of the concerns that the hospital has about accepting all of this road water, because in fact, the extent that it is, or possibly maybe contaminated or tainted in some way, it's being deposited on our property. So we need to just be aware of that. And, that's something we're gonna have to look at closely. So Courtney, I'll turn it over to you if you have anything that you wanted to answer.
Yep, not a problem. So Andrew, why don't we pull up the clearing plan, the plan with the color yellow and blue first, and then we'll skip to the drainage. So there was a question about the amount that was a vegetation to be cleared, and it is 1.72 acres. And so it is colored in there. There was also a comment about the existing, let's say, impervious surface. So if we zoom in a little bit, you'll see like a purple line in between the yellow area up top. And so everything in this purple area is impervious. And the only thing that is not kind of in that, or the vegetated, is in that yellow area. So that is the 1.72 acres. So just to clarify and to show the plan, again, there is also a question to putting it over, and when we were going through the history, the reason I put the proposed plan over the older aerials was to show what it was and what it came into. This is the same probably Google Earth image that everyone else is looking at. And so this is essentially is as close to what we can get out today. So just to answer that question. And then let's switch to the drainage plan that we had up previously. So while Mr. Kelly pulls this up, we during construction,
And as part of the village process, as with any town process or village process, a SWIP is prepared. That's a stormwater pollution prevention plan is prepared. That plan details very specifically how the erosion control is handled throughout each phase of construction, which means that none of the dirt or sediment or anything can leave the site. As part of the site plan package, erosion control plans are prepared and have already been submitted to the village that shows specifically how certain things are protected, where silt fence goes in to ensure that none of the construction sediment or anything that happens goes into the roadway. That's part of the project. It will be part of when we receive it, if we receive a permit, it's part of the permit. That permit comes from New York State DEC. And it is called a general permit. So that is already, as far as the erosion control plan is already submitted to the village, and a SWIP will be prepared once we finalize any of the drainage comments. So that I can talk to as far as that. As far as water quality, this is mentioned. And so there is about, as I said, about 7-8 acres above that's existing vegetation to where we're proposing. This is remaining natural, and hydrologically what happens is when rainfall does fall is correct in that when rain falls over land, it has a different runoff coefficient versus impervious. So the village requirements is 0.3 for pervious and 1 for impervious. So we don't have to go back to the other plan, but over this 1.72 acres, again, is the only area that's going to be changing from, let's say, a 0.3 to now a 1.
And Courtney, when you say 0.3, you mean 30% of only 30% of the water runs off from that area?
Correct. So the other percent goes into the ground. Okay. Now, the drainage structures that are proposed in this area, and again, as a reminder, the impervious area right now at Mather is going across the parking lots and eventually making it into the recharge basin. What a plan that was shown before was the existing condition provided by Mr. Jeter. That's the existing condition, and he's right. All of that water, a lot of it is headed right towards either the drainage reserve area and across the site. What was not shown was our drainage plan, which is all of the proposed drainage that's being installed. To Mr. Guardino's comment before, we also have a village consultant that gave us a much different number, a much higher number. And so it seems that it's unclear about actually how much water from the roadway or whatever this area is being put into the drainage reserve area. Furthermore, there's a thing that's called a HydroCAD report. As part of our SWIP, we do a HydroCAD analysis. So we have kind of two different calculations. One that is purely based on storage, right? You have a leaching galley or a leaching field or a storm trap system, and that water goes through a catch basin and is then put into that leaching galley and then is infiltrated into the ground, okay? The other part of this is taking into account the percolation rates of the actual soil, okay? So when we did soil borings for this project, the borings went down over 100 feet and groundwater was never encountered. So we have a mix of different drainage structures. We have again, dry wells, and we also have a system called a storm trap system. And within that system, again, in each of those systems, after that water is stored, it then percolates and leaches into the ground. The HydroCAD analysis takes into account the soils, the percolation rate of those soils, and those structures range anywhere between 12 and 15 feet. They vary. So from after it goes into that 12, 15 feet of storage, it then percolates into the ground and goes through whatever sand or filter that you would consider, and doesn't reach even groundwater until after 100 feet. Never hit groundwater. We went did our soil borings. So there is still infiltration. The infiltration is not at the surface. The infiltration is below the surface after we store the village code requirement of 3 inches. One other item, and just to kind of put a tie on this, we are working with the village. The village has hired their own consultant to go into where the one catch basin was. What I will note, and if you could go to, it's that plan, Andrew, thank you. Per the easement, there is one catch basin that was supposed to be connecting, okay? This is on the north side of the road. It's supposed to handle a little bit of runoff. What we found out further is that there's a roadway network system that is connected to this basin.
Mm-hmm.
So when this basin fills up, there's a really heavy storm, this drainage out now becomes an outfall instead of the water going in, because when it's connected to all those other infrastructure, drainage infrastructure, the inverts of those other drainage units further down the road are much lower. So the intentions are to work with the village, ensure that all Mather's stormwater stays on their site, as well as work with the village to figure out what this network of roadway is. Like we said, we received Arnhem's paperwork 2 days ago, and we look forward to working with them with this in the future. And as far as, a future promise or no promise, or this needs to be now, as stated by the attorney very early in the presentation, the resolution will state very specifically how this is done. And we also stated that this would be done as part of this project in phase 1. So it's already been stated and clarified that this is part of the project and will be. We are coordinating with the village on what actually goes into it. And that's why there's no design plans yet. One comment on the helipad, I do want to make note, is that there are no helicopters necessarily coming in. Most of the hospital helicopters are, for the most part, going out, meaning that they are picking up patients that are coming out of the hospital and not going into the hospital. So the helicopters that you're seeing are there to take the patient out of Mather and bring them to that trauma, the emergency trauma, or a different hospital. And I think that carries most of them. I do want, though, the hospital to speak, though, I think more importantly, on the purpose of this project. And I think we should end of why Mather wants to do this. What is the importance of this project? And so if Wayne, you can take over from here, it'd be appreciated.
And if Wayne, if you could definitely clarify, I thought the helipad was for the cardio cath lab. I thought it was bringing patients.
No, that the heliport.
So just clarify that.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Laura. The helicopter service is really to transport patients who need a higher level of care to a tertiary hospital. So we do not have patients coming in. Most of them are to send patients to that higher level of care. So let me wrap up by sort of summarizing the purpose. The purpose is to modernize our emergency department, which is 30 years old, to really provide the best care possible for the residents in the surrounding communities that we serve. The patients are really sicker today in our emergency room than they were 30 years ago. Why? Because 30 years ago, our volume is about the same, the number of patients we treat the same, but the less ill patients go to the early urgent care centers today, as they should. So the severity and the acuity of the patients we take care of in the emergency room is a lot different today than it was 30 years ago. And those sicker patients require more things. They require more staff. They require more meds. They require more diagnostic studies, and they just require more nursing and physician care. All that means is more people in the ER, and they really need more space. Some examples of some of the things that we have done that we didn't do 30 years ago. There's pharmacists in the emergency room now to make sure we get the correct medication history for the patient so we can carry that forward for their admission. The pharmacists reach out to the local pharmacies to get the medication history, of the patients. There's social workers in the ER now. They were never there before. Why? Because patients who years ago were discharged are now evaluated and they're returned home, and they get home care, and they need home care services. So those will be arranged in the ER. Those people weren't there before. Additionally, we're training 115 physician residents who have completed medical school and are on to get training. We're training them in internal medicine, in radiology, in psychiatry. And there's 150, and part of their rotations and part of their training require emergency room rotations and emergency room experience. So we have just a lot more people in the ER than we had 30 years ago, and they need places to work. The population that we treat has changed. 30 years ago, we did not have a big behavioral health population that we treated in the emergency room, and society has changed. Now we're treating a lot of behavioral health patients in the emergency room, and they just need a different setup, a separate area, more privacy, et cetera. And we can't provide that for them today based upon the structure of our emergency department. We need the medications that are treated today. There's a lot of different medications today than there were 30 years ago. We just don't have enough room in the ER to store those meds or prepare those meds. As we said, we have a pharmacist that's in the ER also prepares the meds that we have to get the patients expeditiously for stroke medications, et cetera. So we need a bigger room to store and treat our pharmacy. Our CAT scan is not in the emergency department. That's the #1 diagnostic imaging tool that's used by all ERs all across the country. We just need the proximity to speed the care and give faster results to the physicians so the physicians can speed the patient through in their treatment regime. So our purpose is to provide really good care for the community. We're outdated in a 30-year-old emergency room, and we really need to move forward to provide outstanding care to the community.
Well, thank you for that. Anything else from your end, Anthony?
No, that concludes our presentation, and I said we'll be prepared to answer some of the other questions, and we will respond to some of the comments that were in that chart as well.
Okay. All right. That being said, I think, this was very productive. We have a couple of large issues that need to be resolved, one of them being drainage. Some comments about the helipad and again, the clearing, which is something that's prominent and needs to be addressed. That being said, I think we, and the board can weigh in also, but it seems like we need to adjourn the hearing. We can do that based on the number of comments we got tonight. A lot of them were same people making additional comments or just reiterating the comments. I think it's, a manageable public hearing to have on April 7th. If we need to have a work session, as the board had discussed earlier, for that meeting, we may have it in advance, depending on how many projects are lined up for the work session. But I think we're looking to adjourn the public meeting to April 7th, which is a Thursday. And we'll keep the comment period open. I don't recommend keeping it open. We can keep it open to that date, actually, because you'll be resolving comments, or we could close it a week before. We've encouraged people to write in comments. We've given the email address to send them to, Cindy Suarez's email. And certainly, I'd like to hear from the board on both on the adjournment to April 7th. I think we're getting near, the final hearing. I would think that could probably be the final and close the hearing on that date, but we'll see if anything new develops or if there are any issues with drainage that get everything stuck up.
Chairman.
Board members, how do you feel?
Can I just make a comment? I'm sorry, or ask a question. If in fact the 7th will be the new date, my only, it's not really a concern, but what I think could happen is that when we get to the 7th, if there are a whole bunch of if we get a bunch of written comments on the eve of the 7th, and some of them we may not be able to respond to, right? There may be new comments that we just can't respond to on the fly. It's almost like the hearing never closes, because if there are always new comments, dropped on the board's desk the day of the hearing, that doesn't give us an adequate time to respond. So what I'm asking is if you could maybe ask that the comments be submitted a week before that hearing to give us adequate time to respond to them in a meaningful way, so that the board would be in a position then to truly close the hearing on the 7th, if that's agreeable.
I see Allison has appeared. So
I wish you wouldn't say
yes.
it like that. I'm not Doom. No, I actually don't have any problem with Mr. Guardino's request. That said, the meeting on the 7th will also be a public hearing, and comment could still come in at that time. I would say though, however, that just because additional comment comes in or additional questions come in doesn't mean the planning board can't close that next hearing without every single question being answered. I say that because there will still be time to answer those questions for the public after that. A gentle reminder that a public hearing is not truly a public information session. The purpose of a public hearing is for the planning board to gain new information from members of the public to aid them in their decision making. Well, we certainly recognize that our friends and neighbors have questions that they'd like answers for. They can also feel free to reach out to planning staff. My staff has had their head in this project for, I think, nearing on 2 years, and some of those questions can certainly be answered from that perspective. They can also foil the file and look at the plans themselves if they have questions. So while I absolutely understand your concern, Mr. Guardino, regarding the endless cycle of, oh, wait, one more thing, we don't want to go down that route, certainly. But if the chair is comfortable with closing off the written comment period a week before, so the applicant has time, that's fine. But again, I don't even think that if we had new comments on the 7th, that it would preclude the board from closing it, even if a substantive answer wasn't given to an inquiry, because those could be handled post-hearing.
Correct. No, that's
Allison,
good.
just a quick question on Allison. So if the hearing's closed, public could still make a comment, right? If the hearing was actually closed, public could still make a comment?
The public is welcome to make comments. I mean, they can send something in at any time. We do try to keep, and traditionally the planning board has on all larger projects kept a comment period, so that way there would be a second bite of the response apple, if you will. So, which is why this matter is going to be held to the 7th. But again, anyone with questions, even if not all of them necessarily have to be answered by the applicant's team, even though you guys are wonderful and you have a great deal of knowledge on this application. Questions can be directed to staff, and if we can answer it, we're certainly happy to help triage that.
So I definitely agree. We should keep it open till the 7th.
Yeah.
I would ask that we keep the written comments open until that day, because people should be able to write in their comments that day, and then they could still be able to comment verbally that day. And I'm also hoping that perhaps the applicant hearing that most of the comments are in regards to the clearing for the parking, that perhaps you consider some of the alternatives that were proposed by Andrew, I think. Was it Andrew?
Yep.
And we also need to make sure that that's 30 days for us to try and clear up this drainage. So we have a lot of work to do within that amount of time. So,
yeah. Ms. Zimmerman, clear, I'm looking at my notes. I think you're talking about Andrew Thomas, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't hear any other real alternative other than building a parking garage. I mean, he didn't give anything specific. I don't
No,
believe.
actually,
Oh, actually, I could,
yeah.
I could talk to that. I could
Go
talk to
ahead.
that. I'm sorry. So the two recommendations was removing the solar panels,
Right.
putting the parking underneath the solar panels, which would actually place the parking closer to the residences, and putting solar panels on top. That was one recommendation. And moving the recommended parking north, closer to the residences, and is proposed in our application. And the other recommendation was to enlarge the parking, the south parking lot, and adding an 18-foot retaining wall, which constructability wouldn't really be feasible. So we will definitely take a look at some items, but between grades and putting parking closer to the residences, that's not our intentions.
If I may, I just to comment on your comments. I don't necessarily agree with the parking under the photocells. I've lived that dream, but I think it would be at least advantageous to the applicant to take a look at that south parking lot. I think there's some merit to the possibility of whether it's trying to do a cut and fill study to bring the south parking lot up a little bit so you don't have to do an 18-foot wall. I don't know. I thought it was an interesting idea. And I understand as the client, you need your reactions go, no, we can't do that. But maybe take a look at it. So at least there's a response to say, okay, looked at it. It's.
Yeah, of course. I think there's something that we could definitely look, maybe at the south lot. And just, again, there's a lot of, we've tried to stay away from and having our own public hearing, just because as we started this at 6:30 tonight, it's 10 p.m. at night. I don't think it's always advantageous to have us on the same night as your other public hearings. And so maybe we just ask that we consider to be maybe a week earlier than that, so that we're not within that same, forum. So obviously still a public forum, but so we're not kind of clogging up your works here.
So Courtney, we looked at that, and from a clogging up the works perspective, I think the reason we settled on this date is that as of right now, we don't have any other public hearings queued up. So you would likely be the only public hearing that evening. Whether or not after that we do some work session stuff, it depends on fatigue levels. If we find that we'll have a very hefty work session calendars like on our way in, we may just pull that and just call a separate work session. But since the public hearings, we have to maintain notice, we've put it to the proper date. We're not hampered with that when doing work session items. So that's why you guys are going to go to the called date. But yeah, we don't expect you to be gumming up the works on other projects.
All right.
Okay.
That's like you on the 7th. Oh, what about the notice, Allison? We're good because we're setting a date certain?
Yes, since the planning, what I would expect the next step to be is the planning board asking for a motion to hold the matter open until April 7th. And once we do that, there's no additional notice requirement because we've called the official date on the record.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
I so motion.
Okay, before we do that, let's just state that we'll take written comments in case people are listening or participating in the hearing or still on, have spoken or still on. Take written comments until March 31st, I believe that would be, week before. Of course, if we get comments after that, at the April 7th session, we'll be addressing them as well. But at least you'll have a week to look at anything new that comes in, which is pretty much what we did tonight. We kind of cut off what we had received and talked about those, but they'll be forwarded to you. So you'll have a chance to take a look and have some responses ready on that. Okay, sure. That being said, can I get a motion to adjourn the public hearing to April 7th?
I so motion.
Second?
Second.
Barbara, all in favor? Aye. Okay, so it's 4-0. We do have one person absent tonight. And can I also get a motion, unless anybody has anything else, to close the hearing?
Well, no, you're not closing the hearing.
Not the word.
Close this session tonight. I'm sorry. It's
Oh my
10 o'clock.
God, it's late.
It's 10:03, guys. We're at our cutoff time.
That's my bedtime.
Double digits. We're not supposed to go into them.
Can I get a motion just to adjourn for tonight? I guess.
I motion, we adjourn.
All right.
I'd like to second that with a notice to Allison that she's not doomed. She's more like Glenda the Good Witch.
Yay.
Come on, I have my moments, people.
All right.
We're gonna
Night,
get you a
everybody.
wand.
Good
night.
Thank you
Good night,
for
everyone.
positive
Good night, everybody.
discussion, and we'll see you April 7th.
You got it. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Okay, good night.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.